Hey, we are live, and I want to point out that Suzette is probably drinking some straight liquor out of that coffee mug because she gets mad because I always call her out for drinking these coladas and stuff while we're trying to have a decent conversation. And she's, what are you drinking? Go ahead, say coffee. Lie. Set yourself on fire.
Why would I lie? I stay hydrated. That's what I do.
Stay hydrated. What are you drinking?
Well, today I have a jasmine tea that I've spiked with some mint-infused rum. It's quite nice.
What kind of life do you lead where you need a cocktail every day? Is it that stressful being you?
Darling, I encourage my vices with commitment and consistency.
I love your cup. Why don't you tell everybody what your cup is? Did you bring that cup?
Did you go? Oh my gosh. So yes. So Bleach is one of my favorite animes. And so I actually have a matching pair of my Ichigo one. And I have a Black Panther one as well. But Ichigo is on the day because Sundays is all anime all day, every day. So
let me do this. Everybody remembers Suzette. Tell them who you are and why have you on, because you got a lot of stuff in your head.
So my name is Suzette. I am the owner of a company called Refugee. And
shout out.
Yes, shout out. And when I am not helping Black people and other people of color to explore themselves and their sexuality and to address intimacy issues, I also help healthcare organizations manage safety and quality in the care that they provide. So I've worked in healthcare and as a therapist and now as an administrator for many, many moons. And here I am, helping Yusef keep, expanding some perspectives and dropping.
What's the name of your brand for him?
Afimidis is spelled AFIMIDYS.
Because I never remember.
Don't worry, soon you'll never forget.
and here's the thing. I don't know if I can link this on my videos, whether or not we'll get booted, but that's her stuff. Follow her. She's awesome. Look at that.
Yes. And actually, I have some really exciting collaborations coming up for 2020. So you'll be the first to know.
And someone who is new to a lot of people here, but not new to me, somebody who, and I want to put this out there. I know I'm long-winded, but if you just want a concentrated economy of words, dose of some wisdom, some talking points, because he'll get out there, give you some information, and walk away in you can do it in 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah. That's my normal issue is 10, 15 minutes, because that's the only, I'm gonna get tired of myself.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of that kind of brevity. I don't have that kind of let me show you guys his page, because I want everybody, that's the good thing about YouTube is you can have more than one friend. You can listen to me and listen to him. And I tell everybody this, if it's somebody I recommend, subscribe to him for a month. If you don't like it, unsubscribe, but give him a chance. Look at that, 10 minutes. I think my introductions of myself with nobody else on is going to take me 15 minutes just to say hello.
And, a hobby that I started making goals with. And who knew I could do that many videos? But I don't watch TV, so it kind of kills the time.
Well, you know what? My whole thing is I'll watch shows. I don't have video games because that's the one that will get me.
Yeah, I
got rid of those so long ago.
Yeah, I had to put aside my gaming. Oh,
I think Michael Vick was on the last cover of Madden I played.
I think look at that. LAR, you got a friend. I don't know if you know Snuggle668.
I know what Snuggles, but I didn't know those 668.
I don't know what that means. I'm scared to ask. And information always stops by to lend a few good words from a couple diverse different viewpoints. And Monique, welcome.
Hello.
And I is admiring your drink.
It's tasty.
Now, we're not going to play the anime game because we'll be here forever. And I would have to invite a couple other people. But Snuggle wants to know if you've seen Fire.
Yes, I have. I've been definitely enjoying it, actually.
I've heard about it. Right now I'm doing Shield Hero.
It reminds me a lot of Blue Exorcist. It's similar drawn style, that kind of thing. So I'm definitely enjoying it.
You know what? We'll have to do another, because we can go down that rabbit hole. LAR, do you watch any good anime?
Oh yeah, that's why I'm looking up Fire Force right now, because I didn't see that.
And you know what? Psycho-Pass came out with season 3.
Who?
Psycho-Pass.
No. Psycho-Pass is quality, people.
Listen.
Quality.
Yes.
See, the last one I watched was a Kingon Shuren.
Oh,
and what the heck? It was another one with a God Eaters.
Oh yeah, God Eater was good. God Eater was good. I got to binge that. I was, should have been doing other things, but
I'm missing about 4 or 5 because I don't watch TV, but I'm not gonna lie, I will watch anime. I'm still waiting on Baki, even though I watched the other ones. Yeah, Anyway, we topic, man. Don't.
And Snuggles is absolutely right. That Shield Hero is the shiznit.
It is, yeah. It is. So this is something I've talked about privately with a few different people. It's something that I've seen LAR talk about with other couple people. Shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson. I saw you have a couple of words with him about it, and you use a couple terms that I want to bring to the forefront. One is you use a phrase called Blackistan.
Well, I don't use it, but I make fun of people that use it.
Okay, tell them what Blackistan is.
So people, if anybody anybody knows the term Chirac, Blackistan is the term for that. Basically the hood that everybody's trying to get out of. It's a terrible war zone-esque type of place that people are disgusted with, but they live in, but they don't want to be in. So they're trying to exodus, even though they like everything that's going on in there. But we're not going to talk about that part.
Now, I have done, when you use the word exodus, just to kind of set the tone for everybody, when you said the word exodus, that reminds me of a phrase that I never want to misrepresent someone else's words as my own. I had a conversation with somebody who you guys may be familiar with. His name is Tony Maceo.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said something that stuck with me. And for those who don't know, I want you to check this out. Sex and Relationships, Power and Strategy with Tony Maceo. That was a good conversation that we had. He used a phrase that really got me. I don't know if it was his, but I know I got it from him. He said a racial refugee.
That's probably Tony.
He said that we're dealing with a glut of racial refugees. Now this is me talking, not him. He used the phrase. He talked about people who were part of a tribe, who in a racial sense were abandoned or they had to flee. And on a silly level, I remember, because I'm 42 and a half years old, I'm proud to say, I was in the game of life before the internet became a thing, when I was getting beat up for wearing anime shirts. Picked on for, I was that kid that would get VHS tapes from Japan. I was that guy who was reading manga.
Otaku!
And what ends up happening is you find out very quickly that you often can get sidetracked, pushed to the side. You often end up having to make a realization that you might just have to, I'm trying to use the right word, you might have to abandon ship, abandon the tribe. Because what I've seen, and I think O'Shea touched on this, and I want both your opinion on this a little bit. The problems happen when you realize that who you are is only strange to the group you were born in, but there are other groups to whom you're not strange. I don't know if other races go through this. I have a gay cousin that I'd like to have a conversation with about, well, I don't know if he would have this live because I don't know how many people know he's gay. I want to know if he went through this. When you realize the group that I'm in doesn't appreciate the tools that I bring to the table, how do I feel about knowing that I'm part of what may be a counterculture? knowing that I might have to be a social expat. Because an expat for me is, you know, those people who live in different countries. I've lived in a bunch of different countries. I'm in Brazil now. But is it even worse with Black American people? Are you oh, he's taking notes. We gonna have some problems tonight.
All right.
I know.
I'm getting all these messages.
Right.
I'm getting all these messages, so I'm gonna just write it down because my phone gonna keep going off.
Gotcha. Yeah, Suzette.
Yes.
You know, as someone who does things that are not commonly talked about in the Black American community, we engage in different things in the adult entertainment, in the adult field of leather and kink and things that I can't hashtag in this program. When did you realize that it wasn't an even playing field and that a lot of the people who look like us might cause you to have to become a refugee?
So if you imagined feeling external to the community you were born in as a guy who was interested in anime and video games and sci-fi and all that good stuff, add to that the interesting dynamic of being a young Black immigrant woman in New York during those times. You know, and I think that when I entered the wider world, you know, like once you know, because when you're in middle school, when you're in when you start high school, you know, your community is still really small for the most part, especially if you're an immigrant kid, where you're, you know, where you're not even first generation yet, you're like fresh. So there was you had this very small thing, and so you already feel like, all right, you're not marching in step with everyone else. And so college was where I flourished, because it wasn't until I got to college that all of a sudden I started encountering more than just the one or two other people who kind of liked the kind of things I liked. And, you know, it was definitely challenging. It was definitely, I went through a very awkward phase where it felt like the things that I thought about, the questions that I had, the interests that I had, that no one around me thought that they were worthwhile or that they made sense. I remember the first time I saw anime, and it was Wicked City. I'll never forget. And all of a sudden I'm like, yeah.
Wicked City is not, listen, it was,
and then the second, Wicked City. Wait, and I went from Wicked City to Ninja Scroll. Listen.
Let me tell y'all something. Wicked City is 1987 and it still holds up. It is hard.
It's awesome. So, you know, so I'm watching that. I'm watching Akira. And so, you know, I'm listening to a wide range of like white people music. Oh yeah, oldies but goodies, baby. And so here I am, you know, negotiating this minefield, learning about sexuality and imagery and all these things, and you know, I'm just getting my mind blown. Like Ninja Scroll particularly was definitely influential. And
now, don't spoil it. Do you remember this scene?
Yes, I do, baby. And I also remember the scene after that, which was a whole other ballgame. So, and so to answer your question, you know, it was disheartening when I encountered Black men who shared these interests, because I was like, oh my gosh, someone else who thinks like, this is going to be great. And yeah, not quite the experience.
Why not? Why not quite the experience?
And that's when I realized that, you know, there are other dynamics that happen. So for example, unfortunately, there were a lot of Black men who are into anime and things like that, that because of their feelings of getting picked on, of being rejected, of, you know, and their struggles, which I completely understand, instead of looking at me coming up as a compadre in that regard, I felt almost like I was seen as like the enemy. It was, you know, because I wasn't necessarily Asian, you know, that there was, you know, a decided preference for, and this, you know, they would complain about not knowing women who are into what they're into. And I'm like, aren't we sitting having this whole conversation? What do you mean? You know, and or then they would get into the, well, you're not really into it. And then that's when the tests will come, and you know, you have to like prove your knowledge and all this shaggery.
So it sounds like as a girl, you were on an island outside of another island.
Exactly. And then you see other people who are from the same freaking island who want to be like, but you shouldn't really be, you don't really deserve to be here though.
And how old was this? How old was this?
Oh my gosh. I would say probably from like 13 to like 25.
Now here's the thing, LAR, this is where I want to pass the baton to you with a caveat. I have had it said that people talk about, and thank you for defining Blackistan for us earlier, that there is a huge number of people in Black America, not just Black men, but they'll say Black men leaving Black America. And what I would say, especially considering what Suzette said, her timeline lines up with mine. It wasn't as if you turned 21 or 29 or 35 and realized maybe I should get off this ship because it's not built for me. We were out when we were 15. We were teenagers and realized, oh no, I don't think I can be part of this team anymore. And that was a painful thing, but I don't know where you go with that, LAR, because I don't know. I suspect you were a cool guy growing up, because I mean, you have a really cool image. You're cooler than I'll ever be, no matter how cool you are now. So
I mean, I had hair back then. I had waves and stuff.
He said I had waves.
Yeah, waves. That's right, LAR.
I've been bald since I was 15. I literally cut my hair off when I was 15. But I will tell you this, like I said before on my channel, I was born in New Orleans, but I grew up in New Orleans, Chicago, and the DMV. And the reason why, for me, I learned very early that you got two problems. One, everybody doesn't know everyone's culture. Because even in the United States, you depending on which city and section you're in, you can have a completely different culture.
Absolutely.
Some of them are closely connected, but they're different. And the reason I say that is because I was able to get along with people easier because I saw the similarities in people. Because if you come from one place, you're always an outsider. When I went to the DMV, when I went to DMV and Chicago, I had a New Orleans accent, so I stood out. So it's the picking your brain type of thing. And it's the, you know, you can meet friends, but then you still like, you're really not from here. But, and this was the weird part. When y'all talk about the anime culture, for me, it was an easy transition. Because how I grew up, you didn't watch anime because you didn't know it existed at first.
Right.
But you know what you did do? Samurai Sunday. And you watched a gang of cartoons because you will watch, like for me, I remember when I was in DC, I remember Rambo having a cartoon.
Yes.
Yep.
But when I was but I left DC and then went to Chicago in that same year time. Rambo didn't have a cartoon in Chicago. It wasn't on there. So, and I realized when I went to New Orleans, they have certain things were just in certain areas. So the reason I'm saying that is because what we did, all the people I knew, you either were into Kung Fu movies or wrestling. So the guys who were into comic books. So the guys who were into all of those things, here was the one issue that I can definitely agree with. If you were smart, if you were into comic books, even wrestling too much, if you were considered cool, you didn't want a lot of people to know. Because there were two different type of cultures. The culture that, you know, the one that you want to stereotypically fit into the cool crowd, and the culture that I don't want nobody to know this part of me. Because I got friends, they played the cello, but they was gangsters. And they're like, look, y'all laugh at me going home with this cello, I'm going to hurt somebody. You know, I had friends. Yeah, you got it.
I don't want to go too far away from this. You said some things earlier that were both heartbreaking and perhaps true. when you said there were certain things that they didn't want you to know, it could be a musical instrument. It could be that maybe you were smart. Does anyone else here remember the book? I believe it was Tipping Point.
Yeah.
It's an excellent book by Malcolm Gladwell that if anybody watching needs a copy, I want you to message me in the comments and I will get you a copy.
Send me a copy for GP.
Wait, what did you say?
I was like, send me a copy for GP, but I already got it.
And he talked about different quote unquote races and cultures. And I believe, I'm going to misquote him. I want everyone to read it. I believe the GPA was 3.2 on a 4.0 on a 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale was the tipping point in every culture except one where children became more praised, given more opportunity because they started to show a little bit of brain power. Except in one where 3.2 singled the downward spiral of their social acceptance. I'll give you 3 guesses, but you only need one.
Us.
Yeah. And it's
that's a twofold problem. Because I know in my family they wanted you to be smart, but to fit in school you had to play dumb, and at the same time the teachers didn't want you to be that smart either. So the only people who actually wanted you to actually be your best were probably the people that were in your home and your family. Everybody else just wanted you to fit in. At least that was my experience, because the high school that I went to, ironically, it's supposed to be a hood school. Years after I left, they turned it, they brain drained that school. They made a magnet school a few miles away because we had some of the smartest people. We just had a lot of people who was getting into trouble. So they separated the two populations.
Wow. You know what? I wish you could have been here last week. We may have to do this again. I had a very, very good conversation. And by the way, Owl's Odyssey, you'll have a copy coming. We'll talk. Anybody else needs a copy of the Tipping Point, let me know. Now, get this. We had a discussion on a phrase you just said when you talked about brain drain. When you talked about brain drain.
Yeah, I remember that.
When you talked about you tell them how brain drain affects a community. Or rather, how it may have affected your community, LAR.
And okay, like when I got to, I knew it was something different in high school and college. They told me there were 7 different levels of intelligence. So there's 7 different types. And what I realized is we only like orators or athletes. The guys who were good with their hands, nobody really liked them. The people who were good with mathematics, nobody really liked them. The people who are very innovative, when you would say scientifically, didn't really like those people. And I didn't realize this at the time, and I realized this as I got older, that they kept telling us to go to college, but they never told us a specific direction. And the reason, in my opinion, they never told us a specific direction is because they just wanted us to start anew. Because even in my family, I'm on my mother's side, I'm the second person to graduate college. On my father's side, I'm like the third. So, and I have family who were entrepreneurs, college professors, but that's the farmers. Like the brain drain came when I'm sitting in the city and I'm living in 3 different cities, and I realized you don't even know how to grow your own food. You don't know how to fish. You don't know how to hunt. But more so, you don't know algebra. You don't know biology, just the basic parts. You know what I'm saying? I remember being in a situation where I was in high school and I was taking quote unquote advanced higher classes. And my family and friends was like, why are you taking those classes? Like, you could get bad grades like that. Won't you just get like a 3 point such and such and such? And, you know, the kids got Mensa and all that other stuff. And I'm looking at them like, because we're going to college. If I take all these easy classes that y'all ass is getting A's in, I might not do so well in college. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And then by the time everybody went to college, people got kicked out. People got on academic probation because they couldn't actually keep up. And then the people who were quote unquote smart enough to keep up, they never wanted to come back home. I kept hearing news stories. There was like a 5-year period where it was like 3 or 4 guys came back to my neighborhood in the high school on Christmas break and got killed. So it's like, I love there, but do I really want to go back?
Well, you know what? Hold on. We just had a comment that I want to post up and read this because this is an excellent segue. Hold on a second. Not just that one. Where is the other one? Okay. Because of the concept of a brain drain, is because people with the knowledge have problems coming back to their own communities to build it back up because of what the communities do to him. She typed that before you talked about 3 people you know going back home being shot to death.
That's the problem. That's a big problem. Because
why is that problem?
Because I think in an American sense, when you think of the American dream, you don't think of building it in your neighborhood. You think of going up the totem pole as far as class and moving to the space that's already prepared for people like yourself.
I would agree.
So in general, you know, that's the, I mean, like I said this before on a few videos.
For a reason.
Say that again?
It's called moving on up for a reason.
Yeah.
That is the imagery. Think of all of the things that talk about Black success. It's always about moving out of the hood, getting your mom's that crib in the gated community on the other side of the river, you know, coming back with this degree and living downtown in a high, like there was never, well, I can't say never, but I do think that as our history in this country evolved, that became the message. It was, yeah, you do all of this stuff to get out of the ghetto so you could move to where the rich lived. Not that you would bring back resources, because it was seen as a wasted effort. I know in the Caribbean.
I'm going to out myself here just to give everybody some context. This is my home city. By the way, it's not a city anymore. Once your population, yeah. Niagara Falls, New York is where I was born. It's not a city because once your population drops below 50,000, which is a small neighborhood in most cities I've lived in.
It's a town.
I remember it is. And I remember growing up seeing 1 or 2 people that succeeded in just having let's just call it a stereotypical middle-class life come back. And as I grew up and went to college, a lot of them had private conversations with me and said, don't be like me. I regret ever coming back. Now I've got to fight twice as hard for twice as long to get out again, because it's easy to get out when you're, I left for college at 18 years old. 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, I was gone. They said it's easier to get out when you're 18, but if you come back trying to do the right thing and realize you're just going to get overwhelmed, because now everything that you've worked for, and there's a personal, and I'm speaking for myself here, you guys can feel free to agree or disagree. There's a personal wound that you carry when you who did the things to help you become successful. I remember, wait, Suzette, were you with me when I talked about drugs, narcotics, and alcohol?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, children, narcotics, and liquor. We did a chat about that.
Yes, we did.
You're the guy who said, I'm going to wear a condom whenever I bang this girl so I don't end up with some kids I didn't plan on. I'm not going to have anything to do with, narcotics or liquor, or even other people who have anything to do with those things. And you do it all right. And then you leave, and then you go back to save the people who just spent their good years partying it up. That's a wound that you carry inside you. And you're like, really? Now I don't know, let's say 25, 30. Let's say 30. You're just starting as a man, you're just starting to realize what the world is. And you're like, I have all this stuff, plus a little bit of an education. I can go anywhere in the world, but you want me to come back there with you? And it's painful and insulting to even be asked. Whether or not it's the right thing to do, it's painful to be asked.
Oh,
well.
Go ahead, Suzette, because it's going hell.
So, my journey, I was always called smart.
Hold on. Remember how I said I stay away from things? Look at what Ruby is doing. Look at what Ruby is doing. Don't be like
Hey, LAR, long time no see. Oh my God, I haven't seen you forever. Hey, Suzette.
Hey, Ruby, I'm loving the hair, girl. Looking good.
New use 2020, right? And you, well, I mean, and there's Yusef, but I came for everyone else. But you know, because there's Yusef too. What's up? No, I'm joking.
So I have a master list of people that I invite on the show, and I accidentally saved Ruby's number in it. And so now when messages go out, she ends up.
I sneak my way up on, and I know it's an accident. I'm one of those people. You know when you're like accidentally invited, and then you just you come just for spite.
No,
yeah,
look
right.
How bad her channel is. Look at that.
I love it.
Doesn't that remind you guys of when you first got Facebook, or even before that, when you're on GeoCities and you could make a little background out of blocks?
Hey, I did that with Photoshop, and I'm amazing. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Photoshop on your phone, maybe.
Yes.
No, real Photoshop on my computer.
Nice.
That's right. Don't be jealous. I know you hate me because I'm talented. It's okay, though. It's okay, Yusef. You will grow to love my talent and my awesomeness. He's so mean to me. No, LAR, I know you don't understand. He is so mean to me. So I came on the...
I'm sorry. What'd you say? I can't... I'm sorry. The single from Canada is kind of shaky.
You see how he treats me?
What? I'm sorry. We must have problematic problems with Canada right now.
Welcome to the shenanigans.
LAR, did you hear her?
Great, that was great.
I never did anything to him ever. He just started. Like, he's nice to everyone but me. Like, I am like the beat up dolly for all of his pent up aggressions. I represent that like terrible girl in high school who did him rotten. Like, it's something like that. I don't know why he's so bad to me, but it's okay, Yusef. I still love you. So, what were you saying now? But were you going to talk about my vaping? Is that what you were going to criticize?
He was going to cast some shade, just like he tried to call me a lush. Except I don't go to meetings, so therefore.
So you ain't got no problem.
So you haven't reached step 1 yet,
right? Yeah. If you haven't reached first step, admitting you have a problem, then you don't really have a problem. I understand your logic, sister. I'm with you. Feel you in spirit.
Thank you.
And so, before we were so rudely interrupted, I believe LAR was about to share a relevant story.
Well, actually, it was me. And as I was saying, it is a interesting conundrum when you have been designated as a smart girl. Because you get affirmation, but in ways that you end up having to pull affirmation as opposed to affirmation being given because of how you may look or whether you're desired or however that may play out. So
do they give you that for a girl treatment, like you're really smart for a girl?
Oh, they tried in the beginning. Until it became very quickly that, oh shit, you're just smart. But that going through that exercise, what ends up happening when you're a smart girl is when you reach puberty, a very interesting dynamic starts to push forward, because that's when there's this subtle shift. And there's this idea that, yeah, you should be smart. Yes, that's great. But you should be smart because when you have children, you will be able to pass on the smartness, without without an acknowledgement that if you're a smart girl, then you would see how, you know, be put into motherhood in the wrong circumstances or without the kind of financial or relational support that could do that, can definitely derail you, because you're seeing what's happening. You know, I went to Clara Barton High School for the health professions in Brooklyn. And the thing about Clara Barton was about 3 years before I started, it was an all-girls school. And they made it integrated just before I started. So in a class of, let's say, 100 students, there were like 12 boys, right? And it was interesting because I think that it was so recent that a lot of the teachers hadn't shifted fully. But the dynamics in the classes changed because there weren't enough boys to make being smart, you know, a social negative, because there wasn't enough of them for there to be a lot of social consequence for that. So you didn't really see a lot of the things that later on, when I was studying, you know, children and education and things like that, you didn't see a lot of the things that play out when you have mixed education roles, right? And I benefited from that, clearly benefited from that. But the challenge that made was that when I entered college, and you know, when college is a large part of where people expect you to start making the relationship choices that will lead to marriage, or wherever they figure that you'll meet somebody, and you know, by the time you graduate, that you're kind of on that adulthood trajectory. And being a smart woman, that's when I first began to see that not everyone responds to being smart the same way when you're a woman versus when you're a guy.
Let me make a statement, and if anyone watching is an education professional, I'd like your opinion on this. One of the beautifully racist and sexist and machismo things about me is I firmly believe in segregating children during education, not because it helps boys, but because it helps girls. I firmly believe that when girls get to be educated by women alone, they don't carry all the social stigma that causes them to truncate their ability.
I think it's a little bit more sophisticated than that.
Well, I don't mean separated completely. I mean,
I hear what you're saying.
Everywhere except in the classroom.
And I do see where there could be some benefit to that. However, I caution you, because as one of the girls who do not fit a lot of stereotypical gender pathways, it was very difficult being educationally shaped by women, because in a lot of ways my brain just did not go those things. I would tell you, one of the first times I got into trouble at school was because we were going through our, you know, European literature phase, and my teacher at the time, never forget, the teacher at the time put forward Romeo and Juliet as the epitome of the English romantic text, that this was the story that epitomified, you know, the longing of adolescence and and we all had to write a reaction paper. And my reaction paper got me a C, which I contested because and to this day, I still feel the same. Juliet was a traitorous bitch. I'm sorry. I feel like this ignorant girl turned her back on her family to chase off of some dude who then, because she thinks he died, so she didn't even have enough sense to get somebody to check to make sure he was alive, offs herself like a punk, bruh. So the idea that sexual desire for some boy trumped the fact that him and his family killed her brother and cousin and all of that, and she still wanted to engage with him, I was too through. I was too through.
And here's where it gets odd. By the way, Owl's Odyssey just said after her time in the Middle East, she can say that it's a definite benefit to separating the genders. She was an educator in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. More so than just the reasons mentioned, and I hope that she can
Expound on that. Yeah, because I do think that for in the bell curve, when it would help. There are definitely, I see benefits, and it clearly, I mean, you can't, social science has seen this for decades. So yes, there is definitely support. The challenge that I come though is that sometimes we got to be careful that we are actually offering the same level of educational rigor, because
you don't want separate but equal.
Right. And I'm like, we don't do that separate but equal thing very well. So there's always a skepticism that I have. So, that is, so that is why, I definitely, like I said, I'm cautiously supportive of it, because when I have seen it done well, it's an excellent training ground, but it's really hard to do it well. And I'm definitely
like LAR movement is back there loading up on the right hand, just waiting for that opening.
I'm a southpaw. I'm not loading.
Well, you'll never see it coming.
Dang. The thing about school that I learned is, even when it's together, it's still separate and unequal. Because from my experiences, the thing was, teachers treat racial groups different and genders different in the classroom, and everybody's getting the same lesson. So, and I realized the problem with that when I got to college, because when you're in grade school to high school, you get predominantly female teachers. When you get to college, it's not like that. And then in some ways, there's this disrespect for the professors that are men. And there's this disrespect that, like, because they don't know what they're doing, but it's also a different culture, because they have different expectations than the teachers that you probably had. They're not, and then you see this manipulation going, because I remember, the one thing I knew I couldn't do in college is cry or sleep with the professor to get a bump up in my grade. But I knew classmates who could do that. They were girls. And I remember, like, I'm on the dean's list. You went on 3 dates with the teacher. Like, stop acting like you smarter than the people in the class. So, like, the whole culture changed. And I remember teachers in high school. They treated the white kids one way. They treated the Hispanic kids another way. They treated the Asian kids another way. They treated the black kids another way.
Can I ask you to comment on the screen there?
Yes.
Because Owl's Odyssey is a very highly decorated teacher who has quite a few specializations in dealing with children that I can personally vouch for. Can you read what she said out loud for us?
Oh, yeah. Girls and boys learn differently. For the benefit of boys, especially for black children that are far too often diagnosed with wrongful special needs, you can make a more active classroom.
Now, I'm going to tell you why that hit me. I was diagnosed as special needs because I didn't display the behaviors that I thought were congruent for a child, which wasn't true. I wasn't expressing the behaviors congruent with a black child, meaning I questioned, I asked why, I read ahead in the book and asked a teacher a question about something that hasn't happened yet. And they immediately said, well, this kid clearly is mentally retarded because he's not behaving the way we think black children should behave. And I'll never forget my mother telling me as I got older, a lot of the tests and exams that I went through, they had to go through her company health insurance to have me diagnosed independent of the school system. And they were like, nope, this kid is actually pretty clever. It stopped me from being labeled.
This is a story of my sophomore year. I'm sorry.
About your sophomore year?
Oh, yeah. But before you say, just to piggyback on it, because that also is very regional and also very dependent on the resources available. As a black girl growing up in Brooklyn, I never saw an assessment, an actual psychiatric or psychological assessment until I was in grad school and training to be a provider myself. So, even in how we diagnose, like there's a certain amount of resources that even have to be available to even be tested. And then you got to look at, well, who's doing the testing? So it's a whole bigger piece than even that. So I that's why I agree so much with Al's assessment, because I'm like, listen, given the wrong environment or teachers, whatever benefit you could get from segregated education can be lost, to underline Laura's point. But you were saying, Laura, about your sophomore year.
I love your name, Lar.
I like when people say that. That's hilarious. It was my sophomore year in high school. I was in chemistry class. And fraternal twins were a friend of mine. I'm not gonna say their names, but both very, very smart, because I was in grade school with both of them. And they sit in class, and this particular teacher, and the reason why I bring up the fraternal twins is because she loved the white kids in the class. She loved the Hispanic kids in the class. There was no Asian kids in this chemistry class. The black boys in particular, she gave us hell. So, and I'm one of them kids who got put in detention for actually answering the right question. So I waited until and the twins part goes to when we would get test scores. The twins would have the same answers and have 2 different grades. So I waited until parent-teacher night, and my mother never believed me over teachers. So I'm sitting in the class. I'm like, okay, I got something for you. I walked over, because I pay attention. I walked over to this desk on the side of the wall. I yanked the drawer open. I pulled up, because she was saying we were missing homework, and I turned in homework. I reached in there, slammed the papers on the thing. It was all the black boys' papers. All the homework that they never turned in. And I was like, this is why we don't get good grades. This is why we quote unquote stupid. And then I left. And subsequently, she made sure I got a C in that class because I showed her up. And subsequently, I got bumped up to physics honors the next year, which you're not supposed to be able to do if you get a C. So the reason I'm saying this is because the diagnosis, and like I said, I got an aunt that's been a professor. She's like in her 80s now. She's retired, but I have a other aunt that's a teacher. And the one thing she told me, she said, with they'll give us a diagnosis one way, and then give a kid with like special circumstances to make sure that they can fulfill their academic to be more proficient. Yes, if the test is 60 minutes long, this kid gets to get 75. You're not gonna get 75. You might get to 60 or 45. And this makes kids look smarter than they are.
So here's my question. Are you, as we talk about being a social or racial refugee, do we think that our children, not ours literally, but children in the communities we grew up with, get a better shake if their parents abandon the predominantly black or brown schools and put their children in a school where they are, quote unquote, more of a unicorn? Because one of the things that I dealt with is I was bused away from my home, which had a school that was below average, to a school that as I grow up, I realized was probably just an average school, but the black children were more unicorns. And I don't know if we were necessarily treated worse by it. Let me see.
If I could answer that, because,
right. You were diagnosed with several mental deficiencies, right?
I actually really was in real life. And I was going to address that. I want to address really quickly what LAR said first, which is about the extra time. So, I tried throughout college I drank literally almost all day, except for when I was in class, when I was in college, and managed to get, a perfect GPA. College wasn't a thing for me. University was the first time in my life I had actually had to study, period. And at that point, the fact that I had major depressive disorder and I had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I would be struggling with these things, I'd be going through these periods, suddenly became very relevant. And the thing is, what people don't understand when they don't have disorders is that when an hour is set out for you, let's say, and the average person can do this test in an hour with lots of time to spare. Even if they've studied, they'll be able to do it. When you have something wrong that affects your concentration, it affects your ability to calm down. You might have anxiety, panic attacks, whatever that come along with it. It impedes your ability to work within a shorter amount of time. So getting extra time based on a diagnosis isn't you getting an extra leg up. It's acknowledging the fact that you have something else that might impede your ability to do things within the same timeline, right? But ultimately, what we're trying to do is test whether this kid studied and whether this kid can therefore answer the questions. Right. So even if it's going to take them 2.5 hours versus an hour, the point is, do they have the information within them or not? And I think that what we need to do, instead of looking at it as, well, it's unfair that some people get extra time, is recognize that, hey, if your kid is struggling, your kid might have dyslexia, they might have ADHD, they might have something that is impeding their ability to just sit down, focus, concentrate, and get it done. Or even some types of anxiety disorders around tests. They can get that extra time. They can get a special space to write in where it's really quiet, where they won't get extra distractions, whatever it is that they need. But it's about you, if it's for your kid, you going in and investing that time. If it's for yourself, same thing. They have disability type services in all colleges, universities, even in high schools, and it's about you getting those diagnoses. And instead of letting those diagnoses be, a weight or an anchor around your neck, figuring out, okay, well, how can this be a benefit? How can I actually use this then? I don't for example, my godson. So he's a preemie. He was literally born 4 months early. He was born at 24 weeks. And what we noticed is he was a very bright kid. But
is 24 weeks considered viable, or is that past the...
It's barely viable. It is considered extremely high risk.
Yeah, like you technically still could have it would be a very late term, but you could still have an abortion at 24 weeks.
At 24 weeks, there's some organs that may not have fully developed. Like you can really, it can be a bad situation.
He literally fit. Like, we have pictures of us going like this over him inside the incubator, and he fit in the palm of your hand. He was that big, literally. He was an abortion. Yeah. So, I mean, when they told us, like, he's never going to be normal. He's never going to walk. He's never going to see. There were so many things they told us he was never going to do. None of that happened. This kid, he's a bright, energetic, happy kid. Language skills, movement skills, everything's on point.
Nice.
Right? And he's 7 years old now. But the thing is that not everything caught up all at once, right? So, for example, we noticed that he could read long before he could speak, because he could find Fresh Prince. He loved Fresh Prince. So he could find Fresh Prince on Netflix. So you'd say, oh, he identifies the picture, right? No, but he could read it when you pull up the TV guide and it's just words, he could read Fresh Prince and click it because he knew he wanted to see Fresh Prince. This kid was like 3 years old. Right. So, but his verbal skills didn't start developing really until he was already in school, even though he had a speech person to help him. When he got to the first grade, they wanted to go put him in special class. Right. Well, he's behind and no. And I went and I sat down with my friend. She was bawling her eyes out. I'm like, we're not letting this happen. We know this kid is above average. He's not below average. And we're going to fight the system so that way they do not incorrectly classify this kid.
Where was it?
Can I? Oh,
yeah. So I was just gonna answer really quick. It's in Etobicoke, Ontario. So it's basically kind of outside of Toronto, but kind of outside of Mississauga too. Not a particularly rich or poor. It's kind of like in the middle, an older kind of neighborhood, sort of. And it's a very multicultural. So there's not a lot of any group. There's a little bit of every group.
LAR?
Yeah, Ruby, I wasn't actually addressing that part, so I'm gonna make myself a little bit more clear.
Okay.
When it comes to the racial refugee part, there's an undercurrent where you remember the college admission scandals they had last year.
Mm-hmm.
Philip don't know.
Okay, parents in the suburbs were basically rigging the game by paying to make sure that their kids could get into college, even if their kids weren't equipped, paying for people to cheat on a test, paying just to get the kids in, kind of the nepotism grandfather clause type of thing that goes on if you legacy child from university to university. But if you want your kid to go to a specific place, you basically was bribing people one way or the other. Mm-hmm. What I meant about the test taking is one of the undercurrents of that is we think that the suburbs and the PWIs have better schools just because, it's a better quote unquote society. Well, part of that is they actually bend and break the rules to look smarter than other people. So when you're a smart Black kid, what winds up happening is you gravitate to going out there, and sometimes you actually went to a smart area, and other times you went to an area that you come to find out it's not really what it's set to be. And the reason I'm saying that is because
PWI means for those of us who are
predominantly white institution. Predominantly white institution, a regular college and university in America. Because but that whole process, even in high school, because that's how a lot of the friends that I grew up with, saying Pop Warner, they will recruit the kids who were good at sports to go to high schools in the suburbs. But it's not like we didn't still talk to our friends. So what's the classes like? They easy. It wasn't that some people are so good that they want to cheat for them. Other people, they like, no, this is easy. Like they said there's a better education out here, but no, this is the regular stuff we've been doing. And when we wind up glorifying the outside community so much that when we finally quote unquote make it, we never coming back. Because I personally remember going to college, and that was the first year I was so uncomfortable my first semester because I could sleep and hear no gunshots, no helicopters, and no police sirens.
Whoa, whoa. I didn't know you came from that kind of a background.
Yeah, like, okay, the trap house was next door. So they wouldn't, my coach, if I played football, I wrestled, I ran track, I played baseball. My coaches, where you live at? Oh, no, hell no, you got to walk. You going home?
What he's saying is where other kids could get a ride home with the coach, your coach would say, there's no way I'm driving to the neighborhood where you live.
No. My friends, I had friends who played sports that was gang banging. Yeah, I can't come over where you stay at. No. You trying to get me shot? Understood. So for a lot of people, a lot of times we're trying to get out of these communities, and it's like it's a whole new life. Because at that same particular time, my older cousin was in the NFL. So I got to see different neighborhoods, and I'm like, wait a minute. Do I want to live like this, or do I want to live like that? And it's a very, very easy choice.
Well, and see, I get that, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that, right? And I do think, right, and I've spoken about, like, say, for example, the scarcity mindset, whereby when you've been that poor and that broke, right, the second you're not, all you can do is function on a premise of, I can never go back there no matter what. And that starts to be, the thing that motivates you, but also the thing that drives your decisions, right? So I understand that, but see, just like what you said, it's not that the material is different necessarily, right? But what you do have is an implicit bias against the children, not against the fact that, well, these textbooks are just old, or these teachers just don't care, or whatever. But you actually start applying all these things that it's not fair to the kids, right? We blame poor people for being poor, like they had any control over that. And that's the thing that I talk about when I say going back to the community. I don't mean sit there, take your education, take your income, whatever, and then go live back in the community that you grew up in, that you're right next to the trap house, but I think there's a middle ground whereby we can take everything that we learned, everything that we know, and we can go and make a few other kids' lives a little bit luckier by knowing you, because you can be that mentor, you can be that way, you can show them the direction, direction. A lot of us had some type of mentor, some type of direction that when we were lost, we didn't know where else to go, and we were about to give, there's someone there. And a lot of these kids don't have that. So when they find that mentor, I was just talking about this yesterday with my cousins who are in the news and not in a good way. You know, who do they go to? They don't have a father. Mom was working 2-3 jobs or whatever. So who are they going to? They're going to someone on the street, right? That's their father. That's their mentor. That's someone who tells them, here, I'm going to show you how you're not going to be broke again. I'm going to show you how you don't starve. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you how you get respect. And what I'm saying is, what I propose is that for men and women who get out and who understand and who can provide some direction, that's what you go back to the community to do. You can go and do that without living there. You can go and do that without saying, well, I have to raise my kids there necessarily. You know what I mean? Just like you can go and lobby to help start making changes that you see would be fundamentally good for the schools and other areas or other things within the community.
What you say, hold on one quick second. What you say resonates, and I'm going to self-disclose. When I was in the United States, I did volunteering as a mentor, and I'll never forget my first experience with a young man that I was assigned to, and I went through this program, and I was really excited. And I had actually written out a 12-week summer agenda. We're going to read these books. We're going to go do this awesome stuff. I'm going to take you here. We're going to talk every Saturday for 2 hours. This is going to be super awesome because I'm a smart guy. If I can master the art of business and making money, I can take 12 weeks of my life and change the life of a young man. I am an idiot because I had no idea. Like I knew I didn't have it rich, but I knew I didn't have it bad. I remember the very first time I got his file and it had his mom's information. Of course, there was no dad. And I'll never forget my first real slap in the face of what this was going to be like. Because I remember calling his mom and leaving a message and saying, hey, my name is YusefWateef. Let me take you out for lunch so I can show you who I am, that I'm not some weird dude. Talk to you about my plans to work with your son this summer. And I just remember going through these battling emotions. One was, how come she's not calling me back? And two, when she did call me back, she said, listen, I know I'm working a lot, so don't worry about it. Just pick him up on Saturday. And on the one hand, that judgmental side of me wanted to say, my mother and father would never have let me go off with someone who they hadn't vetted thoroughly first. Then I realized she was working 2 jobs and a single mother. So like meeting me could have cost her that 3 hours that she would have needed to be at work. But at the same time, I know I'm not a bad guy. How do you know I'm not a bad guy? And you just gave me your kid. And that was the beginning of the issues, because when we got together, I'll tell you my arrogance, saying, hey, you know what? I read a book. Everybody knows I'm famous, so a couple of things I do that talk about masculinity. And one of them is I read 1 nonfiction book a month. I had 3 books that were going to be awesome books. We're going to read for fun and deviousness. We're going to read The Prince by Machiavelli. I had a book list. He couldn't read at that level. I wasn't giving him extraordinarily difficult things that I thought about, but I was like, let's look at this. And it took me a while to realize why it was uncomfortable. And I remember sitting down talking to men older than I am on the verge of tears, like I am totally lost. I'm trying to give back to Black people anywhere because I do something called pay it forward. Any place I can go where there are Black people, I try to help. And it just, even to this day, I
know why. I know why. Suzette, I see you moving, so go for it.
I think that there are, and in the spirit of self-disclosure, I would say that I kind of exemplify some of the dynamics that we've all been kind of tapping on. Grew up in Brooklyn during, 70s and 80s. Listen. Flatbush was an adventure, always. My senior year of high school, I grew up in Brooklyn, was going to Clara Barton, and I was relocated and did my senior year in Tampa, Florida. Yeah, it was the first time I had white classmates and like white teachers, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And I got a very intimate look at the different implicit biases and the difference in how teachers responded, the difference in resources, the difference in just how students are geared into different pathways. Like, for example, they didn't know what to do with me because once they reviewed my New York City transcripts, the only class that I required for graduation, I was like something like 4 credits short. And this was coming in as a junior. And so basically they were like, you need to take a science class and then you can graduate. And I was like, oh, okay. So the second half of my senior year, I took all college classes because there was nothing else to take other than driver's ed and physics. And which I was grateful for because I beat it out of Tampa. Like, Yusef, you left at 18. Listen, I was still 17 and a quarter. I didn't even wait for my diploma to get mailed to the house. I was out of Tampa, like, bruh. And I went to a school that is part of the City University of New York, John Jay, and it is a very unique environment because on one hand, it is not a HBCU, right? It doesn't have the history of like Black education, that kind of good stuff. But it's freaking New York, so everybody and their mama is of some kind of color.
Someone wants to know: are you still in Florida?
Oh, I used to be. No, my family is there. I lived there for way too long, but now I'm in California. And
we have a lot of international viewers, by the way, and I always remind them, Florida is where the crazy people live.
Stop it! Florida can't help their affliction. It's the humidity. I blame the humidity.
And you want to know the crazier part? Florida is the state Brazilians love most. They flock to Florida.
Yeah, listen. It's interesting, especially South Florida. Interesting. So I say all of that to say that I went to this school that, and John Jay is a microcosm because it is far more integrated than many other campuses in the CUNY system because New York was one of the first states to require that required police officers to have a bachelor's degree. So what happened is that you had this influx of all the old Irish New York City captains and all the people who were like judges or whoever else, and it's very focused on criminal justice. So it was much more integrated than many of the other campuses, which was very good for me personally and professionally. And I say all of that to say that, and yes, it's too easy. People get into trouble because they don't got to stress. And so I say all of that to say that that's part of the reason when I eventually did go into psychology and started learning how to perform intelligence tests and how to write tests and the psychology behind the creation of assessment and psychometrics and all these things, and began to see the dynamics and education and all this thing that I completely had very limited exposure to before I started, that phase of my education. And what that did is that it gave me a burning desire once I left to balance what I saw from well-meaning people who had all kinds of beliefs and ideas about how Black children and other kinds of children operated versus what was really happening, right? And I kind of cross-referenced my experience of it. So for example, when the school shootings happened at Sandy Hook and people were talking about, okay, well, now that we've had these kinds of school shootings, maybe we need to start putting metal detectors in the schools. And I remember this outrage of, oh, how will that impact learning? We can't do that to the children. Oh my God. And I'm sitting there like, bitch, I was at Clara Barton going through random searches and metal detectors.
Well, you got to remember, for a lot of people, and Ruby, I don't know if it's like that in Canada because I don't know of any other country that have the proliferation of guns the way we do in the United States. A lot of neighborhoods, black and brown children who had never committed a crime, who didn't have school shootings, were being pat down and strip searched and cavity checked on their way to classes. Yet all the places where, and I'm going to say something that is factually and statistically
where all
true,
the white boys go and shoot
you don't find groups of black people going into schools and shooting. It's the whole, why are these shootings surprised? Because the concept of believing that any of the children in predominantly white schools could ever do something like that is just as prevalent as the belief that children in black schools are predisposed to violence, because there is no balance.
So, and that's exactly what I would tell you, like at Clarabar Inn, and that was when I was in high school. So this is like at least a solid 10, 15 years before Sandy Hook was even, a thought, right? Our process for getting into school, you came through, you had an ID card that was tied to, that had a photo ID card. You had to put it in a machine and it would randomly blink either red or green. If it was green, you could go through for that day. If it was red, you got a more detailed search. So everyone went through the airport, the big old metal detectors, everybody went through that, but randomly you would get a pat down, full scanned search. So it was interesting that when they had documented violence happening at these schools, that the fear, this concern over the impact of a scan or metal detectors on learning was enough to stop them moving forward, even though we had entire cities that had years of having these safety measures in place with little to no concern about how it was impacting the perception of education and the learning environment. And for those who did study, why none of those studies were brought in to show, hey, good, bad, or indifferent, at least graduation rates stayed similar, or whatever the case may be. If they had taken the data and said, okay, we're not going to do it because this is what we saw happen to children who had this experience, it would have been different. But that wasn't even an option. That wasn't even entertained in the conversation. And so it's those kinds of things that when I think about paying it forward, when I think about the work that I do in healthcare, when I think about what I do in my company, it is about that. It is about having that wider range and understanding those barriers, both implicit and explicit, that so shaped how I came up, and understanding where those challenges may lie. And so to Ruby's point, it's not, I don't have to live on the corner of Church Avenue and Nostrand in order to make sure that there is some benefit from my knowledge to the people and to the women and the girls who look like me and to the boys who could be my cousins. So it's about, what are you doing with that knowledge? I will say also that what I am seeing happening over probably the past 5 years is a greater sophistication, is in people understanding some of these institutionalized and systemic forces that gear and shape our children into certain experiences, and understanding that if any work that we do to dismantle or go around or to create pathways that allow for some of our children to escape that route, then we are still doing what we are supposed to do. That is not necessarily a matter of where we live. It's a matter of, where do we spend our coins? What institutions are we supporting? What kind of avenues and alternatives are we presenting? How are we making sure that what we're doing is opening a door to something else? Like, I know every time I do a review at my hospital of a maternal death, that is me taking a step into making sure that some poor Black woman is not experiencing something that could have been avoided.
But here's where we are. What you just said, I want to take that coin with two sides. You said some poor Black woman. Now, what I'm thinking of is, you're thinking in the context of unfortunate, but I also want to be clear. Poor healthcare, lack of quality education is a function of poverty. Is some of the problem that many people have, is that we're not recognizing that, and this is something LAR and I spoke about briefly, as your income gets closer in line to giving you an affordable living, a stereotypically middle-class living, your expectation of the world around you change, and now you have to decide, do I want to live in a neighborhood where if an ambulance is called, it may get shot at, like where LAR had to grow up and leave, or if my wife's sister mom goes into labor, it's a place with a high death toll for Black women.
Which is all of America.
You know what, though?
I'm sorry, Ruby.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Let's do it in line. Ruby, Suzette, LAR.
Okay.
You got it, Ruby.
All right. Well, what I was going to say is this, and, I'll try to be brief since there's already a lineup here. But a couple things. Now, first of all, I wanted to bring up the fact. So, for example, one of these movies, I love these movies. I'm not really big on mushy things, but like these movies like Stand and Deliver, Lean on Me, Coach Carter, love these movies. They're factual based. This is not this. They made it up. This actually happened. So Joe Clark really happened. And what did he do to get the crime out of his? Did he have to install metal detectors and whatever? Nope. He said, "Get the hell out. And if you're not inside of this building by this time, you aren't coming in today." So there's no being late for class anymore because we are literally going to chain the doors, close the end. Right. So that's a proactive approach. It wasn't set out by anybody that this is what you're doing now in these schools and whatever. No, this is what he's doing, because there will be no more drugs and no more violence inside of my school. The end. Right. This is an investment that he made as a principal. Right. He required certain investments from his teachers now that weren't required before. Before they were just showing up to get paid. And once they got paid, they didn't care. Right? There was no added investment. What I've noticed in general, and this is from my experience here as well, because some of these tropes do exist here, is that when a teacher gives a shit, their class is really well taught. The students come away having learned stuff. Those kids actually behave better within those schools. In general, when there's school pride, you see the same patterns. So then what's really happening? There's that trickle down effect where, unfortunately, parents in these cases are often not available because they are working, sometimes several jobs, you know what I mean? Or they're on drugs, single parents, whereas the other parent, nobody knows and whatever. So they don't have the time to sit there, be coming into PTA meetings once a week and to be going to the school board to fight about every little thing. And they are just hoping and praying that someone in the school is going to care. And that's only if they even know that you can do those types of things, which a lot of them don't know because they were born and raised into basically systemic powerlessness, whereby you don't understand how to obtain any form of power. Things just happen and you just hope. You yell and scream from the corner, but that's all you can do. Right. Whereas in these little white parents from these rich affluent schools that are actually getting shot up, they're going, no, but that's unfair. And they're going to go fight it. They got time, right? They show up at the PTA meetings. They're showing up at the school boards. They are sitting there and they're making sure that they are going to people who are in power and saying, you better not do this. I know you better not do this. Right. You better not do this to my kid. And my parents knew. So it's not that I got suspended and expelled for absolutely no reason less than anyone else. My parents knew what to do. So every time I got suspended for no reasons, my parents showed up at the school board. They didn't really have time, but they knew that that's what they're supposed to do. And they did. And every single time I got back in because it was unjustified. Right. So this is part of the problem. That's where knowledge, because there are parents who wish they knew. And if you could go in and help them, help direct them, help them understand what the hell they can do and that they're not powerless, but be a warm body for them. Go and help them do these fights because they got to work 2 jobs and they're not available to go fight these fights, but you're available and you know that it needs to get done, right? And that's where, again, I look at it and I say, well, what's the real difference? Well, money is power, but in this case, it's power because you have time. That's it. You are available.
We're going to have to do an entire show on how money is the single most important thing because it gives you time. You triggered something that I hope everybody takes a few minutes to listen to. Raising Kings, A Year of Love and Struggle at Ron Brown College Preparatory, which is a school that I believe advertised they were going to get every student there into college. And it goes through the ups and downs of what it's like to really commit to saying every black child, every black boy that comes, I think it was all boys school, is going to make it. Let me tell you something, that documentary, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, this podcast, I think it's 30-minute blocks. Take time to listen to it because it is heart-wrenching, powerful, and brutal, because one of the things that stands out to me the most is there were 2 kids that had a problem with each other, which boys of all races will do as we're becoming men. But one mother said, I brought my son to this school because I didn't want him around other boys like that. And they have a no suspension policy. We work through all of our problems. But you had parents saying the entire reason I trusted you with my son is because I never wanted him to be around all the other boys who were, in their opinion, this may be true, maybe not, predisposed to being the bad kids. You got the microphone.
So to piggyback on what Ruby said, it is always amazing to me how the disconnect that people get between experience and outcome. And the reason why I say that is, so we talk about, like, to use the example that she brought up. So a woman who grew up in poverty, struggled all her life, felt to, experienced powerlessness as far as healthcare, education, whatever the case may be, has a child, life kind of happens, because make no mistake, being poor in America is an interesting experience, right? And so then they become adults, they're in their 40s, and then we suddenly expect them to be able to negotiate the use of power and money and resources. Like, where would they get this from? And so when we step in to provide resources to children or to do things with their kids, and we just think, okay, yeah, that they would just magically, deliciously know these things. Like, a large part of some of my success is the fact that I see no as an option. Like, when someone tells me no, my first instinct is, okay, so you're just telling me not that, but that doesn't mean I can't get this, right? But even that was something that I had to learn. Even that, recognizing that, oh, wait, you mean that just because I'm an employee doesn't mean I can't finesse, doesn't mean that there's not ways to move this around, doesn't mean that there's not things that I can do. Like we joke about the let me talk to your manager kind of part, but there is power in that. And we don't think about where do non-Black people learn that is something they can do. Where do they learn that, yes, that even if you go into a store and the authority, the manager or whoever says yes or no or whatever, that there is a space that you can argue to gain resources or to rearrange something or to get some return. Where in their experience would they have learned that that's even an option? And so, when we talk about these things, like we talk about these women who may have two jobs, or these men who might be hustling too. And maybe the reason they're not involved is because they're out working 3 jobs too, like my dad did, but where would they learn that? Where did they have the conversation? Like, how would you think? I remember I was offered the opportunity to go to boarding school, tuition paid, all that, and it would have taken me out of Brooklyn and gone into there. And I remember my parents saying no. And, years later, in retrospect, I'm like, why did they think that they could go to immigrant parents who already feel like their child is growing up completely in a different culture and country that they're still trying to negotiate, and think that they would be like, okay, yeah, just take my child off into some place out of state that we've never seen or heard of? Like, why would you think that they would look at that as an opportunity? And that's kind of where, when I talk about, if you are going to be that person that comes back to offer resources, to shape, to mentor, to remember that you're not just dealing with the deficiencies of the child in front of you. We're talking about experiences that their families, their parents, their neighborhood that has stretched for 10, 15, 20 years. You're asking for a cultural shift that's going to ripple from their kid to the whole family. And too often, I feel like we try interventions that ignore that dynamic. One of the things about growing up poor, when we talk about that scarcity mindset, it took years before I could shift from thinking that, okay, when I had a paycheck, that I could do something with money other than put it in a savings account and like buy extra paper towels, because I don't know if I'd have money when I next needed paper towels, right? And I
shifted that mindset to, I've got some money and I have to put a little bit of away every month. And that's what I would teach my financial clients.
Right. But even that, the idea that I should, before I remember the first time I read a personal finance book and it talked about pay yourself first and put money in savings and then pay your bills. And I was like, the fuck you mean? I was like, what? not pay my bills to do what? You know? And so, but that's just what I'm saying. I'm like, I know how much it took to learn and the discomfort that came from realizing that. I remembered when I understood that, when I finally realized that I understood more about money than my parents. That was a huge thing for me. Huge thing for me. And I didn't realize that until the first time when my mom, you know, she, bless her heart, she would send me, like, she would ask if I needed like $50 for gas. And I'm sitting there like, Mom, I make more than you and my father combined. But she could not conceive of me being in having that kind of resource, having these, being paid this. I remember the first time I had like a real paycheck, like I thought about how I chose not to have children because of the fiscal responsibility. And
you selfish bastard, me too.
And so, but I would tell you, I remember one time where like what I paid in taxes one year was more than what my mom earned like for a year of her actual gross income. And all I could think of was, how the hell did you raise 3 children in freaking Brooklyn on this?
And you know what that tells me? Here's the thing it tells me, right? One, first, if anybody wants to know where to start and find, I always tell people, read The Richest Man in Babylon. It's a simple read, but it's good principles. And if anybody wants it, let me know. The second thing, what'd you say?
I want it.
Okay. One of the things I'll say to you is this. When you say, how did she raise 3 children with so little money? Doesn't that tell you that maybe if she'd had access to a few financial tips on what to do with money, if she could stretch a check that small, that well, what could she have done with financial education?
I absolutely imagine that my parents, because my dad was there working with her and the two of them were there trying to make it work. And all I could think of is, my God, like I look at the success that my sister and I have had, and both financially and professionally, and the life that my nephews had is just so different from what me and my sister experienced. And all I could think of is, my God, like we'd probably be multi-billionaires by now if my mom had, even if my parents, both of them, if both of them had even a third of the financial education that I received. And it came late for me. I didn't learn a lot of this stuff until I was out of grad school and was already saddled with student loan debt, partially because my parents couldn't prepare me. They had no idea what student loans meant. Like, they had no idea how I paid for school. I educated.
Well, for them, it's a combination of magic and witchcraft.
Basically, there was a lot of be happy then. Like, listen, you know. But I say that now because what my parents know about student loans is what I have taught them. Is what I have taught them as their daughter. And so when I look at and I talk to my cousins and other, you know, and the daughters of my friends and the sons of my friends, like we have very different conversations now because I've gone through that pathway and I see how different my life is because of the knowledge that I got late in the game. And so, you know, I'm like, so when we talk about these things, like that's the part, you know, like I think we underestimate what the lessons and the fears that poverty in this country can give people. And we don't teach 2 things well in America. We don't teach sexuality and sex things well. And we certainly don't teach good financial management. We don't. We let people struggle with 2 of the biggest areas of their lives that tend to have the longest impact. And we leave these kids to fend for themselves in this regard. And that's what we see.
Before we go to LAR, I will tell you this, and this is something I say often. My career in the financial business showed me something interesting, that if you put me in front of any high school class for their last semester, I could teach them the fundamentals of mutual funds, investments, and whole life insurance. And they would get it. Why aren't we taught that? There's a reason. Capitalism. Capitalism works. Capitalism is the reason I got out early, because I understood how to manipulate certain systems. Am I rich? Are there times that I don't have any money? Sure. but I have zero debt, and I haven't since I tore up. I haven't had a credit card since I was 24 years old, and I realized how the game works and working in financial business. Tiny things like that, like working for myself, making a little money, but keeping 99% of the profit is better than working for anybody else, no matter how big your salary is. So check this out. Just Ask Shar, Precious, Classic Ruby, incoming, all day for you. LAR, the microphone is yours.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna be concise, but I'm gonna talk about 4 different points. Are you saying that
we're not?
No. I'm going to be concise because I want to make this point. Because I was going to actually do a live on this later today. First thing is about
your show.
Huh?
Are you inviting us all to your show?
If I do it, yeah.
No pressure. No pressure.
Ain't no pressure. The first thing is poverty, because when I was at the gym earlier, what I also was listening to was Master P. And Master P says something that's very true about poverty. When you're in poverty, you don't make good long-term decisions because of the hunger. And we kind of forget that. When you were talking about the kids earlier, I understood that it doesn't work because we're asking children to have the foresight to make good decisions when they're struggling and starving and dependent on other adults. And there are very few children in that circumstance that can do that. And we're not thinking about how much pressure we're putting on them. And that's one of the issues of poverty. The reason I say that is because in our community, we have this Messiah complex. And a lot of times we put the Messiah complex on the children. We always look for the younger generation. It's always that way. But we forget about the resentment that comes with it. Because you got the kids that they deem to be the one, and whether they succeed or fail, they're probably the most confident. But there's going to be some resentment there because guess what? You have kids that learn that because they're not the Messiah, you're going to kind of leave them out hanging. So they got to work twice as hard as the people that you're backing. Normally, the kids that isn't the Messiah in your mind is the one who winds up being successful because they have to prove it day in and day out. The Messiah kid doesn't. So you got that dual resentment of, okay, y'all, and I say this even in the athletic sense, because most of the guys I know who were athletes and were great athletes and were great at entertaining and are great at even academics, there was always people who people deemed better than them. They've always been, oh man, I learned, I worked hard, but I can tell you this person got way more talent than me. And it's like, but they never put forth the effort because they were quote unquote deemed the Messiah.
You know what? I gotta co-sign that real quick because I was the one jack of all trades, master of none. I started off. I was just good at anything I did. Yep. I didn't have to really put in any effort. I was very, very intelligent. I was talented at, the arts and this and that. It didn't really matter what I did. I was really good at everything. So as a result, I became a master of nothing. And when it got time to apply yourself, like you got to actually now try to be something, go somewhere, run something. I did not have work ethic. I had no idea how to study. I still don't really know what studying means to other people. They've been doing it all their lives. I don't know because I don't know how to apply myself. No, really, right? I'm like, oh my God, it's so real when you said that. It's like, you don't have to be the best at anything. You have to have that motivation and diligence and, to actually work at anything to be successful. Really, that's such a good point.
The thing after that was the apply, like Master P was talking about it. You can learn something, but it's actually applying it into an action that makes you successful. What's happening is we're actually learning how to apply something while we're doing it. And yes. I have this conversation with my son recently, and he keeps telling me, I want to make my own mistakes. And I'm like, you keep talking about mistakes. Like, you're not supposed to, you're going to make mistakes, but you shouldn't have a process where you want to make all your own mistakes, because basically, what about your own successes? What about your own good decisions? That should be the process. You should learn from the mistakes that you make along the way, but you shouldn't want to go gung-ho to making mistakes. And part of the reason I say that is also because when you talk about family and poverty, and when you say the mother's working 2 jobs and no father's around, part of that issue is family strife. Because I've seen it more times than not, where that other family was just walled off, and now you have one of these situations where a child is walled off to a bunch of knowledge that they probably could have had just because of.
What do you mean walled off?
Doesn't have access to. Like, if I benefited from having my dad's family and my mom's family, so I could pull from both of their experiences. But if either one of those are missing, then whatever lessons learned in that family and their journey, you don't have access to.
Truth, I had an ex-girlfriend who's a lawyer, and she was going through she was trying to help out a teenage kid who was getting into trouble. And I had this conversation with her, and she started getting into family law. And I said, listen, you're going to run into people who know where their father is, but when it's time to go to court, they're going to say they don't know their father. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, because if the father finds out about these shenanigans, they're going to send the kid off to their father. And this other family don't want that. So that's what I mean by walled off. People forget, like, part of the because it feeds part of this problem with walling people off. Because back in the day, when they had call ID, a lot of people didn't talk to their fathers because they saw the call ID, not answering this call. You know what I'm saying? Or the visiting and the police coming, or the moving, a lot of this stuff. And then you got young men and young women as adults coming to realization that how much they're actually behind in life because of the knowledge that they didn't get. And the reason I bring that up in this topic is because we're kind of like a generation of wise late bloomers. Because, you know, I was raised predominantly by my grandparents, and their generation, in my opinion, was smarter and more innovative, but less quote unquote educated. But the things that they weren't able to do just because of life and poverty and whatever race or whatever, we're able to do. But here's the thing. We don't have the same drive because we're comfortable. When y'all was bringing up the white kids in the different school systems, those suburban schools and urban schools are two completely different worlds. What people consider adversity is completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we dealing in this where with our group of people, the lack of knowledge as far as making a better life is probably our biggest adversity.
So my question goes back to the original thesis question.
Mm-hmm.
Does it benefit you to stay once you have a door that opens to get out?
No. And it sounds bad to say that, but it's not no as in screw them people. It's no as in Pursuit of Happiness. You remember the movie?
Didn't get to see it.
Okay. He has a habit of going back in Chicago and bringing the children into his lifestyle. And the reason why you can't do that in the neighborhood is because how can I show you a better life if I can't show you a better lifestyle? Because we think about sometimes going back into the hood. And unless you're going to build it up and make it a better lifestyle, you're just, people are going to feel like they're charity cases. It's like, being homeless and somebody passing around a turkey, but they go back to a home and you don't. With the information that you would really like is not how to make this turkey juicy. It's how to put you in a position to be in that life.
So what you're saying, it's kind of like the old stories about the assassins, that there were these guys that would give you all kinds of opiates and show you paradise, But then when you got out of it, they say, listen, the only way to get back there is to do this work for me. You're giving someone an opportunity to look at a lifestyle they'll never be able to, that you can't provide them a bridge to. So if I take one of my younger cousins, because I have older cousins and younger cousins that later in life came to me for advice on how to succeed, privately, of course, but it's a difficult situation when you talked about people waking up at a certain age, realizing there's information they didn't get. And at 19, 20, 25, 29, people are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. People are willing to help you. But if you're 30 and you haven't figured out how to negotiate discussing a salary, how to negotiate a problem you have at work. You know, I remember being a very young man, when I was in college, one of the first experiences I had with how to negotiate conflict. I came up in a world where, oh, well, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I realized there may be some tension between me and a coworker. I say, hey, can we talk about what's going on so that it doesn't escalate? Now, here's what I didn't realize. One, that I'm black. B, that he was white. And me saying, listen, we're having a professional conflict in some of these meetings. Can we sit down at Starbucks and go over it? Translated to him is, I'm
gonna kick your ass.
Life. Big black buck said he wanted to take me outside and beat me to death. And I remember that the person who was our, let's just call it the person who was in charge of what we were doing, was a Mexican guy. And he says, "What? I know exactly what happened because you're a stand-up guy. You didn't want to come to me and cause a professional problem. You don't want to. You were that kid who didn't want to go to the principal for every little thing. If I can just try to figure it out on my own." But he's like, in this world, there's a reason we have a phrase called CYA, cover your ass and document everything, because anything you do will be intentionally misinterpreted.
But that's. You say you're a stand-up guy, and I say this about the country. This is not a stand-up guy country.
Right.
So what becomes problematic is, and I've talked about this before, where we live in a nation where everything is acceptable if it makes money. So we really don't care to the extent, we only care to the extent of how much you made at it. You see, if you're doing something negative, you ain't make much money at it, you ain't shit. If you made a lot of money at it, well, I know it was illegal and immoral, but you know, you are a genius. You're an entrepreneurial genius. I don't care about the 37 people that got killed yesterday because you at least made $67 million at this. So we using the assassin thing, I am showing you paradise, but you got to work for it. Because back in our community, people forget, and this is why I said when I was raised by my grandparents, what kept the neighborhood intact was actually Jim Crow. Because everybody who had a skill was in the same neighborhood.
Viewers, can you tell them about Jim Crow?
Jim Crow was the segregation of America. You know, the apartheid. If you're not American, that was apartheid before apartheid, after slavery. Jim Crow. You know the way the cities are built. If you're wondering why, how do the black people live here and the white people live? Basically, Jim Crow. The freeways, the railroad tracks that cut off the white side from the black side.
If I can weigh in, for international viewers, Jim Crow was a systemic system of law and regulation and coding that was used to artificially limit the living patterns, the financial outcomes, and the education and professional choices of Black people. They were systemic laws put into place deliberately for suppressing the ability of slaves who were freed from being able to access resources and areas, from everything from where they could purchase real estate to where they could get books to how they could be educated, that whole system. And so they were called Jim Crow because they were a part of Reconstruction, which is a period of history that happened after the Civil War occurred. And so anytime you hear Americans talk about Jim Crow, that's what they're talking about, the systemic use of these laws and regulations to enforce living patterns on Black people. Go ahead.
And if y'all don't know, Jim Crow, technically, really the last remnants of it, as far as all the systematic stuff, was supposed to be in the 80s.
Supposed to be.
Right. So just know that's how long it was going on.
Yeah.
But even with the housing bubble, that's kind of extension of
It's
Jim
not kind
Crow.
of. It is.
Hey, okay, you're right.
It is.
But
Right now, even I would tell you, even things like healthcare regulations and healthcare laws, there are still things on the books right now that are deliberately made to enforce healthcare patterns on Black people. Like
and saying that is the reason why this comes up is because you know all of our greatest minds and greatest people lived in the same neighborhood. When in New Orleans, I was born in the 9th Ward, and people don't realize they have communities. The Black people in New Orleans decided if everybody's in the same area, I'm going to help you, you're going to help me. Oh, he knows how to do foundations. This person did everybody's foundation. This person did everybody's framing. This person did everybody's floor. This person did everybody. And then the dentist did everybody's teeth. The doctor did everybody worth the health. The farmer did. So it was this community thing that to the point where people probably don't realize this, but New Orleans has a Vietnamese culture also. The Vietnamese people came to the Black people to learn how to build communities. So that's what we lost, because when we kept after Jim Crow, everybody kind of went their own separate way. So now you don't see that in the community, and if you come back to the community, there's this underlying resentment, not necessarily, not necessarily because that you think you better than me thing. Is just I know what you've done with your life, and what have I done with my life, and
that's something, and that's something. I know people who were older than I am. I have a specific cousin that left home, and I remember as a child the way they talked about my cousin was just like an animal. I thought this cousin, who was a little older than me, so I never got a chance to meet as an adult, I thought this cousin was just a filthy beast. And then when I became an adult and we connected, it was like, wait, all you did was leave and create a better life. You're not, in fact, an animal. And and then you know what else? That little bell clicked. And I looked over my shoulder and they were saying the same thing about me. Because I had the audacity to leave. And then when you go back, even discussions become difficult, because once you become that refugee, your way of living, you go back and you end up saying things like, hey, what have you been up to? Oh, I'm the new manager at the Quickie Mart, which, so what? Quickie Mart needs managers. What have you been doing? I'm considering where to spend Carnival when I live in Brazil, which city I want to go to.
They ain't trying to hit
How do we have that conversation? How do we have a conversation? Earlier today, I posted a video about exercise. Mm-hmm. How do we have a conversation when I'm like, hey, come down, we'll go to the park, I'll show you this place outside that's pretty awesome. But then I realize we're both the same age. We're both 42, except you're critically overweight. You have dietary issues that mean for you to even come to my house to eat, it's going to be a problem because I don't have any of the stuff you're going to eat. And it's difficult. I discussed it, a little bit. Clean Death, if anybody wants to check it out. It's like a 2-minute video I did. Mm-hmm. But I want to admit that I've been running. I've been avoiding something that Snuggles 668 posted because I don't know how to address this. And I'll actually, let's let go in reverse order, because I'm going to actually give the hard one to you, LAR, and then go down to Suzette and Ruby, because I got to admit I'm lost. I'm just going to set that free.
Okay, so you want a real answer? Okay.
How can Black people build a successful community? That one?
Go for it, LAR.
Okay, if you really want
this, do Black people willing to put themselves in front of the bullet, knowing the system is doing?
If you want to build a successful community, you're going to have to get all of your ex-military men and all of your grown men to kill off all of your dysfunctional men. And you're going to have to get all of your...
Wait, my audio had a little problem. Woo! Can you repeat that sentence for us?
Oh, man. LAR.
You're going to have to get all of your military men and all of your grown men to kill off all of your dysfunctional men. And the other,
So for anybody that's got a problem with
that's just
LA,
phase
I'm
one.
going to show you his channel so y'all can go and just get on his ass, because what he just said, we might have to have another whole. That's a whole video series. That's his channel. I want you to go subscribe, so when he says something else that pisses you off, you get mad at him, not me.
And okay, phase two, we're gonna have to have all of our, even technically military women and grown women, to kill off all of our dysfunctional women that are enabling these situations. So, because to build a community, what you need is a community mindset. And the thing that people forget that old school people had, you could leave your doors unlocked, but if somebody came in your house, they could get shot, and ain't nobody gonna say a word because they're not supposed to be doing that. See, what we have now is a community where the worse you act, the more love you get. Let me take this back. Oh, and we're going to build a community. Number 3, we're gonna also have to take all of the pastors, get the money out of them bank accounts, and say, look, either this money go in the community, it was community money, take all them damn cars and our jewelry back, we're gonna reinvest in this neighborhood. And if you don't, your ass gotta go too.
So Rowdy Benoit said purge or leave the dysfunctional drone matriarchy and build elsewhere. He said 2 different statements, but I just want to go with that first sentence. Are you talking about a purging? Are you talking about yeah, I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this, but there really isn't one, is there? No.
Listen, there was a movie scene recently. I saw that was a clip from a movie. With person with the black and blue. When the woman was running, knocking on doors in New Orleans because she had been shot. I got an actual cousin that died like that in New Orleans.
Wait, say that again.
There was a scene in the movie Black and Blue where the cop, the female cop, was running, knocking on doors because she had been shot. She was looking for safety. I got a cousin in New Orleans who got killed like that. Nobody would let him in.
Your cousin was injured looking for help.
No, he wasn't injured. He was murdered. He was running down the street. They were shooting him with a rifle. And nobody would open the door to let him in because they didn't, quote unquote, want to get shot too. The reason I'm saying that is this. If I would at that time come from where I was living to come back to New Orleans and I start doing the very same thing, the guys who got away with that murder, they was just kicking it in parties. If I would have came back home and did to them what they did to my cousin, I'd have been in jail. You know why? Because that same community would have been like, that's so wrong. No. Oh. See, you can't kill a dope boy in our community. You can't kill a jack boy in our community. You can't kill a hitter in our community. But they can kill you. They can rob you. They can sell to you. You can't, and I've listened to somebody was talking about the City Girls and all that stuff, and Megan Thee Stallion, when the girls make these songs about setting guys up to rob them. I don't think y'all realize how many women have set guys up to get killed, but she went off scot-free. See, those type of people are what's destroying the community. The preacher is destroying the community.
If I could just say one thing before you move on to the preacher, just really quick, because I want to make it clear that I don't think that it's not that the community is sitting there and going, we love the Dope Boys and support their movements, right? There is an internal policing of these communities, but who's internally policing them, right? You had the Crips and the Bloods, these organizations almost that were for the betterment of the community and started as a way of self-policing in a positive direction. But now that they're not in a positive direction, it comes down to that they are the law. And so, you fear the law. You fear if one of their dope boys gets murdered and they want the justice or whatever it is, they don't want to just reserve it or handle it themselves, which is normally how it goes. It's not that you're going to jail, you'll be dead. But they're going to tell why, because you're not the law and you're not the thing that they fear, especially if you don't live there. Right. So, I mean, we have to look at as far as why are people moving the way that they move, and they got to live there every day, and they're not going to sit there and open their mouths knowing that it's a death sentence for them.
here's, and I know what you're talking about, Ruby. I get it. Here's the kind of weird thing about because to make a better community, we got to get rid of the underbelly, right? Because the underbelly of the community did not take that negative aspect and turn it into anything positive. The reason why I say what I'm saying is because that element of our community, whether you know it or not, if you keep your hands clean, they're going to turn into the biggest snitch in the world. Not because they couldn't get you, but because they want to use you as an example. See, this is how they really are. It's not, it's a tactical thing. If we never think about, like, somebody, one of my favorite people, ironically, actually from my neighborhood, is Fred Hampton. You know who got him killed? Black. You know, was he doing anything problematic? No. So, you know, part of the culture that I grew up in Chicago, I know of the whole gang culture. And like when we talk about policing the community, it's not just policing the community as in, it's resetting the standard. Because the dysfunctional element of our community likes the dysfunctional standard. And they're willing to fight and die for the dysfunctional standard. But the hypocritical part about it is they don't want their children to be. They want their children outside of it. The only thing I hate worse is that behind our negative past is the children of those negative people walking around with their odes to their dads and moms who were in the streets like that was cool. I'm such and such a son. I'm such and such a daughter. So you got some kind of standing? This is what we doing? And that's why, like, that's what I mean by the preachers. You look at all of these churches. See, what people don't understand about the preachers in our community, the preachers are heavily invested in real estate and business. They're heavily invested in real estate and business with your money. Your same congregation, guess why? Pastor got a place for you to stay because he paid for it. You paying him rent and you paying him tithes. You paying him tithes and you paying him daycare. You paying him tithes, daycare, rent, and you're also paying for his corner stores. That's a problem. Because he's pimping you. You're looking at it in a religious sense. He's looking at it as a business sense, and he's not telling you none the same. He ain't even being honest with you about that. I'm using this money to economically pimp the rest of y'all. Forget Jesus. But I'm sorry, I went too long.
Let's I mean that you know, I almost feel bad now because that's something that's hard to follow up behind.
Suzette got them guns loaded.
I was gonna say, have you met her? Like, have you met any of us? I don't think any of us are like, oh, that opinion was so good, I shouldn't say nothing. Yeah, now let me blow that shit away. Come on, let's go. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Suzette.
All right. So, I think that my perspective is a little different because I think one of the biggest traps to American culture is American exceptionalism. The idea that America is the only and best and you got to live here. There is a whole world, and sometimes the decision has to be made as to, do you leave and start again somewhere new? I think that America, and it's so funny because, you know, I was reading The Testament, which is Margaret Atwood's continuation to A Handmaid's Tale. And it was interesting watching because, you know, one of the premises of the book is that it was after, you know, economic collapse and all these other things that martial law was declared in the United States, and that basically that was what was used as the avenue to shut down, you know, rights of women and to make this nation state of Gilead and rah rah rah. And you know, the interesting about it is that she borrowed a lot of the historical evolutions of things like the concentration camps and how the rise of Nazism in Germany and kind of how that all evolved and things like that. And America, I think America is a huge country. There's a lot of land space. Our people have definitely been shifted and geared to particular areas of it. And the good thing about that is that it has allowed, pockets of culture to develop, like when we talk about New Orleans and the rise of that culture. And, when we talk about like the Caribbean enclaves in Brooklyn and, the Latin influence and the Afro-Latin influence in South Florida and these kinds of places. But if you look, there's huge swaths of this country that are just empty, right? But I think that one of the biggest barriers to the Black community making wealth is the fear, because of things like the Tulsa race riots, what they did to Black Wall Street. Like in American history, specifically Black American history, every time that there has been, when 2 or 3 have gathered in their name and had 3 shillings to run together, there was some kind of desolation that occurred. Right? From air bombings to burning out here to lynching, like that is what has happened. And I don't think that we sometimes, when we talk about ways to improve our community, ways to rebuild, ways to do things, like I don't think we give enough weight to the fact that we have a culture here that is practiced at destabilizing forward progression. They go, if they're able to do what they do if we're able, as from our government, because I do live here, look at how we've done this to African nations. We've done this to Panama. We've done this to Iran, to pockets in Asia, to Vietnam. Like when we see prosperity and it's not on the terms or with the barriers that are perceived, military action, law enforcement action is taken, right? So I think that until we have a real honest conversation as to how we will protect ourselves financially and militarily, that it's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream. I think that the moment that, even if we were to take all the Black people, we're like, okay, you know what? Fine. We're all going to go to Montana and we're just going to live there and just fine. Y'all do whatever y'all want with the rest of the country. We just going to be here. It would not take long before we're invaded. It won't. The moment, I think that there is a lot of intellectual dishonesty about the fact that whenever, even like when we have success cases, like for example, when you brought up the example of the school, the Ron Brown school, they are doing exceptional work. Ask yourself why that's not replicated. Why is it that school boards, then there are several school boards that I know that immediately after the success of the first graduating class of that school put in coding and put in codes to ensure that their school districts could not have single sex schools. Like there is I don't think that we talk about that without, we focus on the individual, on, the dope dealer and the false idea of Black on Black violence and all these things, instead of looking at how are we structuring economic, educational, and personal development. What are we doing for that? I don't think it's a coincidence that so many Black therapists struggle financially after grad school, that they don't get the resources to return and offer services to their community. It's not a coincidence. It's not. But yet we still fall into the what I feel trap of saying, well, if we just remove this portion of Black people, then we'd be okay. No, we wouldn't. I think that
was that a hand raise?
Yeah, now that's to give clarity. I am not saying that there are not problematic swaths in the community. I'm not saying that there are not mindsets and philosophical beliefs that would undermine the outcome, right? And I'm not saying that we should not put things in place to address those things. But what I am saying is that I think it's a little bit simplistic to say that, well, if we just got rid of, that would be the same way if I was to say, oh, well, if we just got rid of all the men who were not feminists, then we would just be fine. No, that would be simplistic and minimizing. I think that it took a multifaceted effort to get us here, and I think that it's going to take just as multifaceted a dynamic to get us out. And I think that we all have a role to play. I think that, yes, I think it's great to have big brawly men like Yusef and gangster men like you, Lar, taking care of the degenerate element. However, that being said, I still think that there's a place also for women like me to make sure that both men and women have access to reproductive controls, that there is a space for sexual liberation, that we're not trying to rebuild our house using the master's tools when we see that so much of these things are flawed at its gate. So I wish I did have a pat answer. I really do. I think that it would take the majority of Black people living in America to get on the same page that what we have done thus far is not necessarily working for us, and to have some real frank conversation as to some of the barriers, because there are barriers that are both internal and external. And I think that sometimes the conversation leads one way and not the other.
Before we go to Ruby, LAR had his hand raised for quite a while patiently, and I appreciate that. Go ahead, brother.
Thanks, LAR.
No problem. I'm sorry. Let me say something about what I meant also. On a psychological level, you got to kill the negative image.
I hear that.
So when it comes to us as a people, we're viewed in our culture and outside of our culture unfairly because we're viewed as the negative image. So if we get rid of the head of that, because the country actually did that to us in reverse.
Right.
The Martin Luther King and Malcolm X thing, that was killing that image, and we went downhill from that.
There. Mm-hmm.
So if we kill the other image, we go back to that. But I'm done. I'm sorry.
I hear your point, but that's kind of the part that I get concerned about, because a lot of times when we talk about where the culture needs to go or what we need to do as a people to move forward, I often hear this, oh, we need to return to, or we lost our moral code, or this modern feminism evil. And I'm sitting there like, please understand, like, when we had all this quote unquote moral turpitude, like, we weren't doing that great. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't see how allowing me the opportunity to choose for myself whether I want to be a mother or not is somehow dismantling Black culture.
What I will say,
that's not it.
To Rudy, who said restore accountability and moral values because modern feminism are a failure and a cancer. It affects Black people and other groups. The last time I checked from my grandmother, who was born in 1910 and died at 101, in her stories, it was like our strong family structure didn't stop the Klan and Jim Crow from finding us and murdering us. That's not, like, there are a lot of problems that we have internally, but Black women being feminists on the list of problems,
pretty low. Pretty low.
It's an individual choice, just like your political affiliation. Do I think it helps Black women? No. But last time I checked, I've never been threatened by a bunch of feminists. Like, they've never, like, I've never felt like my hand on my
up by a feminist in the club or sexually assaulted by a feminist. Really?
I've never had to check from my wallet in a room full of feminists, and no feminist has ever stopped me from getting a woman I want. Like, none of them have ever been like, hey, I saw you talking to Wateef. He's a sexist, misogynistic pig. You should get away from him. It's never happened to me. They never jumped in front of me like that. So LAR, go for it.
To LAR, I wasn't saying that was the argument you were making.
No. I wasn't against you. I just wanted to make it clear because we was on this thing and it's going on a platform and somebody was might have like, oh, that's what it is. So I'm like, no. The other thing, like what you just said about the historical thing, the only reason a lot of our community has this thing where we don't think about it or we don't even know about it, that quote unquote civil rights era, not just that era, not just Malcolm and Martin or the Nation and Ali and all of that other stuff, Thurgood Marshall, all of that. What wound up happening is there were two segments of Black America then. There were people who were against all of that. And it was like, I don't know what are y'all talking about? And there are people who were for what was going on. What our community didn't want to admit after that is, after all of that, after Martin, after Malcolm, after the Panthers, after because people don't even know about the DOD, which preceded the Panthers. After all of that, all of the people who were like, oh, they were right. That's what changed the community. Because then it was like all the people who was like, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Then it was like, oh, they were right. So when people start saying we need to go back, they're kind of like, oh, I get it. We were fighting the wrong battle at that time. And now it's like we need to be focused on fighting the right battle the whole way. Right. Because we're so stupid. And I hate to say this. I had to get on my parents about this. Why y'all were kids with Martin Luther King, and y'all allow people to say he was the I Have a Dream. Y'all know he got killed over money. Why did y'all let us grow up being kids? Oh, he was wanting to integrate everybody. No, that's not what it was about. He was like, hey, we need to get paid. But this was the part that was like, okay, let's admit it now. So I'm sorry.
No, I think, like I said, I think that there are lessons to be learned, and I think that this is why I love studying history and social evolution, and I know Ruby is my go-to person for evolutionary science. But there's stuff to be learned from all of these things, and I think that I think that's why I said I think that the solution is going to be a complex one, because I do think that we're going to have to beg, borrow, and steal from all of these different things that we've learned, all that we know now that we maybe didn't have access to, just information, just the access to what the internet gives us puts us in a different place of social evolution than we were previously, and we have access to tools now that just didn't exist back then, and so I think that we just need to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, that while there is history and there is things that we can learn from that we're not locked into thinking simplistically about, oh, well, if we just returned and put these things back in place, that everything will be fine. I think that we are in a complicated situation, so it's going to take complex answers. And it'll be when all of us are like, well, none of us have all the answers. Like, I certainly don't believe that feminism is the be all end all. Like, that's not going to save us. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I do think that there is value in all of these different realms of thought, that having a more sophisticated understanding and at least a willingness to examine may put us on a different pathway, because good, bad, or indifferent, the world is changing. Into what? But it is changing.
Well, let me do this real quick before we go to Ruby. I want to point something out, because I got a couple private messages. They're like, hey, how come Ruby isn't paying attention? And one thing I do want to say is that listen, can I say one nice thing?
Oh, you're gonna say something nice? Hold on, I'm gonna hit a refresh.
Right, hold on. Let me start recording.
I wasn't ready.
Oh, what I was gonna say is, I want to say thank you, because one of the cool things that Ruby can do, Ruby has the ability to listen, talk, and constantly go into these thumb wars on her phone, and she's constantly in the chat room, which, I mean, she's juggling 4 or 5 different things at once. And I want to say thank you for that. I actually appreciate how she engages the people in the chat room. And so I gave her a blue wrench.
I got hardware. Thank you very much. See, and this goes to show you guys, you can be the most hated something on Yusef's channel and still get a wrench. There you go.
Right? You talk about diversity. I just gave my least favorite Canadian moderator privileges. That is my good deed for the year. I got it out of the way early. What's today's date?
There you go. Yeah. 360 days of evil coming up. All right.
So you got the microphone, Sister Ruby.
Yes, and seems like I'm not listening, but what I was doing is, and I explained it, but now I can post the link. So on the Prophet of Thought series, I think it was almost a couple years ago now, he did a topic, and I was on the panel, and it was, what if you ruled Black people? What if you were the king or the queen of Black people, right? And so now you get to start from scratch. You get to create a place called Blackville, right? Now, what are you going to do to create a prosperous, happy black community, right? And so you've got basically there's 4 ladies on the panel plus Brother X, right? So that's 5 opinions in total, and it started from almost like step 1 to the very last step, and everyone had very different ideas, but we were all building our own image, right, of what steps would need to be taken and in what order. And it was interesting, you did find that some of us did say the same things, so but we said them in different orders. For example, so me, psychology, what was my number 1 step? Psychology. Of course it was, right? Some people made that step 5 or step 7 or whatever. So I just wanted to, since we were having this discussion, kind of give you guys that perspective and say, hey, first of all, you could hear my full opinion, but just a bunch of different people's. And what would we do? Since that was a question posed, but that's not the topic of our discussion. So we're not going to go that deeply into it. But now, with that being said, and I think that it's an important thing to note, and that's why I'll start here with it as well, is we have a lot of psychological personality disorders that are currently not even diagnosed, running rampant in our community, entirely untreated. It's so prevalent, in fact, especially the personality disorders are so prevalent that we don't even think they're disorders. We think that this is normalcy, right? We think that there's some genetic component where our men and women are born inferior or born broken or born whatever. And we don't recognize that we are creating, because personality disorders are created, right? So that would be the very first thing that I would do insofar as, okay, listen, I think what I would do is I would establish a community, a smaller one that had a lot of room and potential for growth, right? So, whatever this plot of land that could eventually have a very large population, but we don't need to start with a large population. We need to start with a smaller population of like minds who have various strengths and talents to kind of build a hub to begin with. I think it would be beneficial if the majority of them, they either provided a service that we know we're going to need, such as medical, educational, or they were all people who worked, their work was online based. So that way they don't even need to leave the community in order to run their businesses, in order to earn money at first. So that would be like the first thing I would do. Now, as far as new people coming in, that would kind of be a requirement for me. Like, we would need to be first handling these psychiatric disorders, and you having one doesn't exclude you. You just don't get to take part until you've been treated, until you've been assessed. You have a treatment model going, and you have been successful at that for, let's say, 6 months or so. And honestly, I think it's almost like these TV shows we watch, like the Yanla Fix My Life, where there's always these catharsis moments. I think people will be shocked at what it is that has really been holding them back, or what they could do that really is just about them, that will change their reality incredibly significantly. Because a lot of what I think our dysfunction is, it's not the environment, it's not genetic, it's pain. We have so much pain and so much trauma holding us back, slowing us down, creating, driving us to places, into behaviors, and to reactions, into perceptions that are so dysfunctional. And that's why when we get together, we can't function. If anything, we are less functional when we are together than when you break us apart into groups. Because
whoa! You said we are less functional when we.
Yes.
Can you?
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, I need you to unpack that one.
Okay, so, and this is what I've noticed. I've noticed this. I'm talking about my experiences in Canada here, right? Where you have a bunch of different immigrant populations, including my own. And what happens is Asian people, right? And I do mean the entire damn continent. You take the individual countries, the individual cultures, right? And they trust each other, right? Those Chinese kids that used to play with us in middle school, by the time they get to high school, they're not our friends anymore. It wasn't like a mean thing. They trust each other. They rely on each other. They build with each other, right? So do the Jewish kids. So do the Indian kids. So do the Pakistani kids. They trust each other. And so they are taught to trust, build, help, support, grow, and learn from each other first and foremost. That's what you value. That's what you do. That's what it is. Obviously, family first, but your own second, right? We do not have that perception. In fact, if anything, we don't support our own. We do not trust our own. We do not gravitate towards our own. We do not look at our own as being the ones who have the wisdom, the knowledge, the support systems, the love, anything to help us build and grow. When you go to school, so if you go to a school like mine, McMaster, right, university, where it's predominantly white people, and Chinese people, and then a little bit of everyone else. What you'll see is this. So you go into that classroom and there's a few Indian kids. They might not know each other outside of this class, but somehow or another, over the first few weeks, they end up sitting closer and closer together till the point where they are all together, right? You get a few black kids, what you will see is that we will always sit very far away from each other. We do not sit next to each other in classes. One of us will sit in the front over here, the other one will be in the front over there, one will be in the back. We do not try to gravitate towards each other. We do not try to make friends with each other. We do not try to make support systems with each other. And even if you are someone who's not trying to hold negative ideals and belief systems from your own, and you don't hold them, you love Black people, you want to work with Black people, you have a lot of experience that tells you that they're not going to support you, that they're not going to be trustworthy to you, that they're not going to have your back, right? And so in and of itself, that's a psychiatric disorder, because that's not normal. You are supposed to, right? This is biologically, evolutionary developed, that you trust people who look the most like you. So in and of itself, if you have a skin tone most like me, I should trust you more than someone who is paper white. But I don't. And I should be able to, but I can't. Someone whose nose is like mine, someone whose hair is like mine, right? And what we do is we try to make ourselves look more trustworthy to other races, because we need a group. We understand we can't be islands in the world. We need a group. We need belonging. We need support. We need all of that. But what ends up happening is, again, through experience, we start experiencing the fact that, hey, I can't trust my own. No, you know what? Black people don't support businesses. They're not going to support my business. I'm going to run a business, and I'm not going to cater to Black people because they're not going to support it. Right? Or for me and my mother, we continue to support Black businesses, and Black business owners continue to let us down because they don't value our dollar. And so they think, for me as a customer, because I'm a Black customer, my green money ain't as green as the white person's. I'm not asking you for the brother or sister discount. I never do. But yet the service that I'm getting now, you have a good business. It's well rated. Why is it that when you serve me, I'm not going to get that same service? And I mean, it's a really constant, regular thing. And I'm talking about the dynamics here in Canada that I've personally experienced, where I ran a business, and because I intentionally said, I want to cater to Black women, my business went under. And more than one Black woman in this business, it was Mary Kay, told me to stop catering just to Black women, or my business is going to go down.
Ruby. For those of you who don't, this what you just said, that it breaks my heart when there are so many points of connection that are negative. For people who don't know, and let me back up for a second. I want to put this here. If anybody wants to pop into Classic Ruby's channel and pressure her for having stale videos.
Thank you, Reigning Woman. I have a topic I'm going to be recording this week. I actually have a topic for real. Yes.
Awesome. Yay.
So what I wanted to say, not just to Ruby, to the people listening, for anybody who knows me, you know that my career now, I run a company that I have a humble and burgeoning editing, copy editing, proofreading. I write resumes. I coach people on public speaking for things like TED Talks. A lot of mine comes from, you have a book or a newspaper that needs to be edited into university level English. I'm the person. If you have a resume that needs to be written, I'm the person. If you have a website that needs to be ghostwritten, I'm the person. Well, I want to show you guys something. Before this career, I was a financial professional. And for the record, everyone here, I want you to join me on LinkedIn as well. I'm who I am. I don't have any fake names. This is me. As you scroll down, you'll look at my experience, but I want you to go all the way down to my longest career. Before that, I was a financial professional with 2 different well-rated companies. Now, here's where things get weird. As I started to do very, very well, I was sent on these company retreats. They'd give me all kinds of company perks and benefits and free weekends to this and that because my clients were so happy with me. But here's where it got weird. I met another Black guy, much older than I was, very successful. And when I use the word successful, what that means is he was very financially lucrative. He'd made his clients and saved his clients a lot of money. We measured our success by what we did for our clients. He put his hand on my shoulder and sat down with me and put some words of wisdom in my ear. And he said, you know, there is one thing as I look back on some of the things you told me you've been doing in your career. He said, I noticed you said you try to spend at least one day every week at a Black organization or community center talking to them about financial professional advice for free. I said, yeah. And I smiled. Then he said, you should really stop doing that. It's not going to help you at all. You're just wasting your time. And a part of my heart literally rotted and fell off. It was so painful to hear. He looked me in the eye and said, you're just wasting your time. I don't think emotionally I ever recovered from that, from somebody that I looked up to who was very successful, who gave me advice that helped me earn my clients more money. And when he said that to me, it was like,
yeah.
There's one thing that I've spoken about maybe years ago. It's just a stereotype, but I use it from time to time. America is competitive. Every group in America has an aspiration, and every group in America has an enemy. The aspiration is white people for every group, and the enemy is Black people for every group, including us. Mm. So these other groups come along. Yeah, they want to be in a position of white people, but they're still adversarial to us. But we're doing the very same things with each other. We want to, part of the being a refugee is, I want to live the American dream. When you say the American dream, it's really a white dream. And you know what you don't want to be? Black.
Yep.
You know. So I hate to say that, but
it's the truth.
It is
the sad truth.
It's a common experience I think all of us have had. Lord knows I've gotten enough of that. Like, I've straight up had people ask me when because you know, not only am I trying to target Black people, but target Black people and have them happy sexually. Like, bro.
You said something earlier that I don't want to go too far away from. Well, Ruby gave us some information on a channel that said if I was the ruler of Black people, I would challenge not just myself, but all 3 of us to do a video or invite a group panel and say, if I was in charge of, and it's going to change for everybody, maybe for Ruby it would be if I was in charge of mental health for the Black diaspora. Suzette, if it could be something like if I was in charge of the sexual, emotional wellness of the Black diaspora. LAR, if you were to say I would be in charge of the social growth and well-being of Black America, how would we answer that? What are the 10 things we would do? That would be, and I'm welcome to suggestions on what I should do, but that would be, I think that would be fascinating. That would be fascinating.
You don't want my answer.
Yeah. Oh, I so want your answer.
Monday I'll be Goku, Tuesday I'll be Vegeta. And I keep flip-flopping days. That'll be
I also want to say thank you to Reigning Woman, who has an amazing channel. And I tell everybody, I know I'm a bit aggressive, but Reigning Woman can be that cool glass of water on a hot day. I encourage everybody to go to her channel and check her out. She's amazing. She's someone definitely worth. She starts her shows with some chilled out music and just kind of talking to people, whereas I'm just like, stick it in, you know, and she's
lube is your friend, my dear. Lube is your friend.
Yeah, there's no such thing as too much lube.
Lord. Okay.
Hilarious.
But you know what? Whenever Suze is here, I'm always scared I'm going to say something again because we get close to these edge conversations.
I know. I'm always like, no, rein it back.
You know what I'm thinking about doing is right after
in my head is a prepubescent 14-year-old boy.
Apparently, yeah.
We can do
Seems
this.
about right.
When I get to maybe 1,000, if I can get support for like our Patreon, we can have those after side discussions. Everybody will be welcome to that. There's a few things that we got a couple of messages on from Rowdy Benoit. He said, you know, order, discipline, accountability, excommunicate the dysfunctional, cut the welfare state, open a healing center, stop promoting Hollywood propaganda, and stop up the alphabet community agenda.
Here's the thing, though. Who is going to determine what dysfunctional means? Because there's a lot of things that I would term as dysfunctional, regardless of the fact that you might be functioning in ways because you're not ratchet, you're not ghetto, you're not hood, you're not gangsta, so you think that you're functional. To me, there's a lot of things that you might be doing that I would still qualify as dysfunctional. So who is making that determination? Who's the arbiter of functionality?
If you're not saving 10% of your income, I think there should be corporal punishment only for adults over 18.
And I'm sitting here like, but a lot of people like corporal punishment.
Right, that might not be punishment.
That may not be helping you.
As a Black man, I think the one issue that we have as Black Americans, when we think of community, we think a monolithic community. Mm-hmm. All of those things that he talked about are a community combined. You know, we're living in a country and we forget it's set up like that. The military has its own community. The financial district has its own community. Yep. The agricultural system has its own community. Engineering, what you do is, you know, your mating combines the communities. Not necessarily, not the communities themselves, because guess what? If you in the military, if you marry somebody in the military, now you ingratiated in that. You marry somebody in finance, you ingratiated in that. You marry somebody in engineering, you might not come from that background though, and we forget that. Like it was dysfunctional in one community is highly functional in another.
And often communities have things that are functional, but only, I use the prison analogy. I have a cousin that went to prison for a considerable amount of time, and the habits that he learned there can't help him any place other than prison. And he had to unlearn, you know, certain behaviors that don't help you in the quote unquote productive world. Rudy Benoit said, produce manufacture items. That's going to be very difficult. Can I suggest you read a book called Capital by Karl Marx?
Ooh, baby, you bringing Marx in? Oh shit!
Well, let's. For difficult questions, there are no easy answers. We just can't.
Absolutely.
Instead of quoting Karl Marx, what I would say is, and I'm open to having that conversation. We talk about the means of production. Please read Capital by Karl Marx. It will help us to have this conversation a little bit better, to put it in an easier term.
Okay. Can I just add one really quick thing when you said, because the thing is, right, I have a friend who's lurking in the chat right now, so I'm going to address this because I did address it when he said it too. And so he's actually one of those people that he had kind of learned, you know, street rules. This is what you do when someone disrespects you. This is how you react to things. And it's like, you can't do that if you want to stay out of that life and be in this new life where you're now pursuing an education to do something different. And, you know, he had to learn that. But I remember this one time. So he said, you know, he was so dismayed with Black people. And this is kind of finishing up my point as well, because he was at school, he was at university, and so he's walking by, there's various study rooms you can you know, book. And so you walk by and there's the quiet group of, you know, Japanese kids studying, and then there's the quiet group of Indian kids studying, and there's a quiet group of white kids studying, and then you get to the black study room, and those kids are dancing around and joking and whatever. And he was so ashamed. He's like, you know, I'm pretty sure he literally even used the term monkeys. He's a Black man. But he was like, he was so embarrassed by this behavior. And I said, well, see, here's part of the problem. What we don't want to do is acknowledge or accept any differences of ours that could actually be good things for us if we accepted them and loved them. We are so ashamed that our brains and our physicality are not the same as with white people or the Asian kids or whatever. See, here's the thing. We actually do have a much higher level of automatic physical intelligence. And when I say that, that is to say, some of the biased questions on the SAT, because we know that they're always biased, have to do with movement. Period. Yep. And so they can ask a question about ballet or something that a Black person has no idea about necessarily. But then when they give you those options and you have to plug in a word there, white people automatically get it wrong. Black people automatically get it right. It's one of those things. It's an automatic bias, right? So we have a natural understanding and connection to music and connection to movement. And us trying to repress that, stomp it out, be ashamed of it, actually, I think would be to our detriment. Because you know what? We will connect very well to turning something into a song, to remember it. That's a very valid study method, actually, and memory method. But we're ashamed of it when we make it into a rap and everyone has fun learning the lyrics. Why? Why are we ashamed of things that benefit us and make us smile? And because all these kids are at university with you. There's obviously they worked hard enough, they're diligent enough, they're smart enough that they got into university, and they're diligent enough students that rather than partying somewhere, they're sitting in a study room. They could be anywhere, but they're in the study room. So they're studying. They're just studying differently. And see, this is one of those things, again, with our warrior spirit, with our natural connection to movement, to music, to rhythm, all of these things. We could be utilizing those things. And I don't mean, well, let's become entertainers then. No, I'm saying that it's not hard. What they just did to me, that made me proud, that they sat there, came up with freestyles and whatever, and dancing and whatever to help them remember hard material. And you know what? All of those kids probably did exceptionally well because they weren't sitting there trying to be like the Asian kids or the white kids or whatever. I think we have to learn how to love and accept us.
To piggyback on that, hold on. To piggyback on that, I've always found it very interesting that when we think about order and discipline, that we look to European standards of order and discipline and apply those in a critical fashion to any Black culture that is different from that. I mean, I think that it is interesting, but given that from our diaspora, we have always used music and movement to tell our stories, to communicate messages, to do all of that. But yet, when we do them to acquire information or skills in our modern era, it is that we're out of control, that we're animalistic, that we're all of these things, as opposed to it being that even now, and that's the part I think where Ruby and I are coming from, is that even though now we have evidence in social science, we have years of research showing that some of these ways that we have moved throughout our space, throughout our history, throughout our culture are of benefit, that it's still condemned in children, that it's still seen as, oh, we're deficient, that it's still seen as a barrier to our success, as opposed to something that has helped us be resilient, that what has helped us survive. I don't think it's a coincidence that throughout all of the migrations, throughout all of the movement of our people from Africa to the Caribbean to Europe to here, that music and auditory history has trailed with us. And so, but yet, you know, and that's kind of where I talk about when I'm like, you know, when we talk about trying to build liberation using the master's tools, like, you know, let's be careful, because when we say things like discipline and accountability, these things are defined. Who is making the definition? Who is the one? And how are we deciding this is how we will evaluate whether we're doing this right or not?
Right. Because see, like to me, for example, every kid who has a strong understanding and knowledge of music can have a strong understanding and knowledge of math. Right. Now, Asian people understand this and they actually utilize that. Now, this is something that we happen to have. What we need to do is learn that translation, learn how to utilize that. And then we can use that to help teach our kids, and instead of our kids walking around thinking that math ain't for them. Because I know way too many Black people who think math ain't for them, but they are musical whizzes, and no one taught them the piano. They taught it to themselves. That means they know math. They just don't understand that they know math, because we don't understand how those connections happen. Because you know what? It doesn't benefit white folk for them to know that, because they don't have that musical whiz inside of all of them. So therefore, they haven't studied it. We need to study that and apply that to our own.
before we go too far away, there's something I wanted to address that has slipped me earlier, and this is open to the panel as well. Rodney Benoit, one of the things he said is stop the alphabet community agenda. I'm going to interpret that as meaning gay and all the different acronyms that go with that. What I'd like to say is, if they do have an agenda, and I'm going to give the same answer when people say stop the Jewish agenda. If they have an agenda, I want to learn how it got done. Because one of the things people say is, well, you know how you'll get in trouble if you say anything negative about Jewish people or gay people. Yeah, I kind of noticed that. How come everybody gets a free pass with us? How come we're not in a situation to make people tremble at the thought of saying something disparaging about people who look like me and you? And there is no answer. So if there are any gay or LGBTQ or Jewish people in the audience, they want to share that wisdom on how you got your team to the point where if anybody says something bad about you, they're going to have thunderbolts coming out of the sky and sizzling their face. Put me in the game. Put me in the game.
I'll try to answer both things.
And I have to point this at LAR because he very specifically said, Elmar, what do you think?
I'm Elmar? Okay. Okay, well, I'll answer that first. Everybody else has an agenda in America, but everybody else's agenda comes from a position that they are looked at as less of a physical threat. When I think about us compared to every other community, it's like you talked about yourself earlier. The coworker took going to Starbucks as an ass whipping. You put any other type of person in that particular situation, they're not going to be looked at as I want to take you to Starbucks to kick your ass. So part of these agendas come from the idea of this person is not going to. They're coming from not necessarily as a position that they would consider weak but cunning. You know, you walk in a room and you black, it's gonna be some shit going down in somebody's mind. So I think that's why everybody else's agenda can work better than ours, because our agenda is adversarial to the fabric of America. And the other thing I was thinking about when Ruby was talking about is our experience as Black in America is completely different from everybody else. And what works for everybody else doesn't work for us. And I thought one of the biggest things that in evolution, adaptation is a quality of, you would say, the what do they call the apex predator? The apex predator, or the best of the best, are the animals who can adapt the most. Well, in America, we've adapted the most, but America isn't a land of adaptation; it's a land of repetition. So it puts us in the worst position because we can adapt to anything. We as a group of people are a jack of all trades, but everybody else is a master of something, and they've used putting us in that position. Well, the way the country was built to put us in a position that we're always adjusting and adapting. Everybody else isn't really. You think of Asians, you think of them doing specific things. You think of white folks, you think of them doing specific things. You think of Hispanics, you think of them doing specific things. You think of us, it's everything. We say music and entertainment, but we also know we don't get credit for the other things. So I think it sucks because everybody else to a degree has to adapt because this is the same country, has the same aspects, but when it comes to mastering something, I think if we go at something and master it, it's an all-out war with the country, which is silly to me, but that's how I view it. So my bad.
I think that, and maybe, like I said, maybe it's just my practicality. I feel like sometimes, this concern over an agenda that isn't ours, I fail to see, even if there's this whole grand scheme gay agenda, right? I fail to see how that impacts us developing what it is we want to do to move forward for our own people as an agenda. I think that like when I look at, one thing I will say about the history of Jewish people is that they used their singular history, like for example, the Holocaust, right? Not all Jews around the world experienced the Holocaust, right? But it was such a pivotal part of their history that no matter where Jewish people were, they circled around that and was like, this is some bullshit, right? We have slavery and Jim Crow, right? And regardless of whether you were in the Caribbean or Canada or wherever, it's still an atrocity that occurred against our people, against people who looked like us. But what I often hear is there's so much attention paid to all the different shades of brown and all the different pockets of brown, instead of saying, listen, good, bad, or indifferent, whether you came from Jamaica or in Kingston, or whether you came from Jamaica, Queens, guess what? America has this history, there is this experience. And so those things are not the divisions that they can and should be, right? And that's not to erase anybody's part in it. It's to say, guess what? You know what? My parents being from St. Elizabeth and Kingston did not stop Becky from treating me some kind of way in the corporate healthcare space. And regardless of, when I'm looking at opportunities and I'm looking for pulling ahead Black people, I don't care if you are from New Orleans or whether you're from Wawawaville, Kansas. If you're Black, you're on this ship. You know what I mean? So,
I get it now.
So that's the part that I'm kind of like, when we talk about these agendas, I'm like, guess what? Good, bad, or indifferent, gay people rallied around Stonewall. They did. They rallied around, when there were laws put into place to keep them from being married, they rallied around. So when we talk about, so I think it does kind of plug back into the matrix that we talked about earlier, of this idea that, when we're looking at what are the things that we rally around, that master of none, jack of all trades, that's what I see. I see that instead of us looking at, guess what, these things that are happening to divide us and to keep us from progressing. Instead, you see this crab in a barrel mentality, this idea that somehow if you're a different shade of Black or you're from a different pocket of Black, then that means that somehow, these things are irrelevant. And I'm like, I think that that's a mistake.
This, you know what? I get what is going on because we've talked about this before. When it comes to the Black agenda, I think what has happened is, if you're Black, you have watched everybody in America cling and use what would be considered the Black part, the Black experience in America, and marry that with their own struggle and make it an agenda. So the problem with that is, for one, it was very disrespectful, and for two, people made their struggle more than it was. Like when you say the Jewish agenda was hooked to the Black agenda and civil rights, and they were using what happened in the house. But see, here's the thing: that they got paid. And not only did they,
our reparations, silence.
Right. Hispanics, same thing. Asians, actually, same thing. And the gay community, that's like, no, that's enough. No more, because it's just like being Black. Being gay and being Black is two different things. You can be Black and be gay, but that's two different experiences. That is, the Black historical experience and the gay experience is different, because gay does not have a race.
Okay.
So I think that's the issue of even all these agendas, because other races did the same thing. They, It's just like being black. How the hell is it just like being black?
Well, I will say that I think for me, I always get cautious when people start saying that these experiences are different, just because, like, for example, I can't separate being a woman from being black. Like, I can't. It is built into who I am. My experience is shaped because of what I experienced as a black woman. Do you see what I'm saying? So the idea that somehow that my goals or my agenda, that somehow I have this separate agenda, as opposed to it being, hey, you know what? As black people, we are going to have to also make a space for all these other parts that make up who we are as black people.
You know, that's the issue. I'm sorry, Ruby. I'm gonna keep it real short.
Okay.
You are a black woman and you have a black woman's experience. But if you hear a non-black woman say, you're a woman and I'm a woman, and that situation is just like you, because I'm just like a black woman. You can be like, if you don't shut your stupid ass up, that's what is going. That's what the black agenda is like. No. That's not the, you know, that's the issue.
I hear you.
And I get that. I'm going to add one thing to that woman thing, though. So if you are a woman under the age of, basically, you haven't gone through menopause yet, and you have pain, your pain is dismissed, you are hysterical, you're all kinds of things other than legitimately in pain.
Absolutely.
They test you for all the majors, right? You don't have the big C word, whatever. Well, then it must be hysterical, it must be emotional, you must be depressed. I know, because I've experienced this.
Absolutely.
And white women, Asian women, they don't care. That's a non-race specific thing. So now that's not to say that overall their experience as a woman is exactly the same as me. However, I can say that there are spaces or areas where being a woman, period, means that you are going to go through a specific struggle that men don't go through. In the same way, right? So, I mean, I do think that there is that to be mindful of, is that I think it's okay to say, on this level, I understand, but on a global whole, obviously, I don't. Or on this level, I relate, but on a global whole, obviously, I don't. Versus trying to say, well, since I relate on this one aspect, then we must have the exact same experience, girl. Like, no, we don't. Exactly. That was the first thing. But the second thing I was going to say is this, and it's one of those things where every time someone says to me, you know, the number one issue we got to fix in the Black community, and then they mention anything to do with the LGBT community, and I'm like, that's the number one. Like, to you, out of all of the problems that we have, that is the number one. And you think if we just banished gayness from blackness, let's say that was possible, you could just banish it, it would solve so many issues that we'd be well on our way towards healing and productivity and financial wealth. But some people really do. And see, to me, I think that that's asinine. But beyond that, I just wanted to add in and say this. The LGBTQIITIQIA. I don't know. I honestly, I think I put enough letters in there. I'm not sure they're in the right order, right? Because I know there's a bunch of Q's, right? Because there's queer, there's questioning, there's intersex, there's okay. My point is this, right? The more letters they added, the more powerful they became, right? Mm-hmm. And that's to say, right? Because at first, you could be lesbian and gay. That was it. That was the only struggle. Bisexual was not a struggle. Mm-hmm. And then they said, okay, fine. Well, then we'll go LGB. Fine. But those transsexual people, they have nothing to do with us. And then they said, okay, well, we'll add them too. All right. Okay, well, people who really like dressing up in women's clothing, but they're gay, but then sometimes they're not sure if they want to be men, but they mostly want to stay men. Okay, well, they're queer. Okay, well, add them too. My point is that the more people that were allowed to be part of the struggle, the stronger they became. The more people who got acknowledged as being part of the struggle, the stronger they became. The less they started infighting, the less they were sitting there trying to fight amongst themselves about who gets to be in part of this acronym, the stronger they became. And so that is where my issue comes in. I'm not saying we shouldn't identify, obviously, especially historically, there are differences between different groups and populations and whatever. But my point is we spend way more time doing that than we do saying, but overall, here's our blanket, here's our umbrella category, and let's fight for the umbrella category.
You know,
We would be a lot stronger if we did that versus sitting there trying to figure out what all of our differences are, who has the worst victimology, whose fight or voice or whatever is more valid today. If we stop sitting there trying to fight for the differences.
We call it an ugly dog contest is when you say my dog is uglier than yours.
Right.
And no,
Right.
And Rudy, before we go to LAR, I want Ruby. I'm trying to understand this question. He says, at Ruby from Montreal, Canada, tell me, for the institution that supports women, and then name the same equivalent for men.
I'm not from Montreal, Canada, darling, so I can't tell you anything about what's happening in Montreal, Quebec.
It might be an honest mistake, but tell us where you're from.
Oh, I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I want to clarify this. It's a stupid little point that isn't relevant to the conversation, but it drives me crazy. No, because it drives me crazy when Americans do it, right? So it's the equivalent of someone saying like, okay, so he's from Atlanta, USA. Wait, what? No, he's from Atlanta, Georgia, right? No, because Atlanta is a city in a state. Right? But people do that all the time. Oh, from Toronto, Canada, from Montreal, Canada, from some random city that's this big on our giant map of Canada, like as though there's no provinces, there's no other divisions at all. You're just from Toronto, Canada. We're all like, it's seriously, Canada's like this big, and it's like, I don't know what people think of Canada. Every time I have these conversations, though, people really, it's almost like no one's ever seen a map of a country that y'all are literally attached to on the same continent.
That's not it, Ruby.
We're Americans. We can't even all name 50 states.
There you go. Thank you.
Right?
Now, LAR,
geography is not the strong suit.
Thank you. Like when we talk about geography, please, Ruby.
Like every time
anybody who is not from America,
you see it a lot in travel groups. So people are like, "Oh, I want to go to Spain. I want to go to Vietnam, and I want to go to Africa." And I'm like, that's a continent.
There's a whole ass continent.
So I want to do something real quick. Rudy said he's from Montreal, and LAR. To you, I want to say that when you say things like this is not okay. This is definitely not the place where we want to go accusing people of crimes against children.
Wow.
This is not a place where we really want to go. I would love if you have your own channel and you want to give us clear and evidence-based discussion about it. But for me, that's not even a discussion because I don't see any clear evidence to support a statement like that. Because you've been interactive, I'm more than happy to have you stick around. But what we want to do is I need you to save that discussion and that rhetoric for a different channel. Or if you do it on your own, feel free to email me a link and say, I want you to watch this. So we need to.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but to me, first of all, I think that sentence is repulsive. And second of all, it's so flawed because pedophilia is not part of the alphabet acronyms.
We're not even.
No. I'm just saying it's not part of the acronym, right?
Totally agree with what you're going to say here. We're not even going to let this train leave the station. We're going to go to LAR and we're going to pretend that last 37 seconds, that was just.
No, I really said it. I'm not pretending I didn't say that. But okay, going back to the, I'm not. But going back to the original one.
I'm gonna do the first thing I'm gonna say real quick about the geography, just so anybody who's not from the United States understands. We're idiots with geography. We don't even count Canada in North America. We don't think of Central America or South. When we say America, we just think United States of America. So that goes for every other thing we see, okay?
We're on the same landmass, though.
No,
like it's
he's absolutely right, though.
No.
I gotta tell you, he's right, though.
Okay. There's a movie with Chris Rock, Head of State. He's like, you're gonna be the president of America. Which America? North America. Which part of North America? That he was trying to be specific. Like we don't look at.
Yeah.
United States of America is a continent in its own to us, okay? And
and I was telling someone this yesterday, and this is actually true, or the other day. So in maps, right? Like when they're teaching kids in school and maps and whatever, the way that they display the map, first of all, is that America is literally in the center of the galaxy. And second of all, they display it in such a way like almost like it is a detached place unto its own. You have like this little dark speck at the top of the map, which is Canada, and this is why no one has any idea that it's this massive landmass, because it's just like there's Canada up there, whatever. The only thing that's big up there is Alaska. Everything else might as well be like this big. Like it's so funny.
So I hope you understand that's the same for Africa and South America.
Yeah, no.
Europe is huge as shit.
I have no idea that Brazil is enormous.
Let me tell you what's sad. There are people who have lived their whole lives in America and do not know how big America is.
That is true.
Like literally, like I've had conversations with people where they're like, well, why are you so late? I was like, because we got like 4 time zones in this country, right? Like, nope. So it's unfortunately like you'd be amazed at how little people who live even know about this own country. Like
I mean, there's some it's a melting pot of people who are too arrogant to know about the rest of the world. Now, going backwards, I think will wound up happening. There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
No. See, but you know what I'm gonna see? DC.
What the?
I know New York somewhere over there.
I know.
And that's Texas. Sao Paulo is in Texas. That's what I'm gonna see. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at that, I'm gonna think, H-Town in Sao Paulo. Anyway, I don't know what Sao Paulo is, right? That's what I'm gonna say.
Yep.
Now the irony of when Ruby was talking about people they added to the group and they made the group bigger. There's an opposite side to that. Because I'm 40, so I've seen the evolution of ideologies go through their phase of figuring out what's really going to work. And what happens is, just like everybody else, if you keep adding stuff to your group, people are not going to take your group seriously because they're like, oh, you're creating struggles to make yourself more powerful. They at some point, they shut it down. And I think that's the issue that's going on. That's part of the pushback, because when you keep adding, see, when you say the Black agenda, the Jewish agenda, the white agenda, but when people say the alphabet, it's a dig at you gonna keep adding goddamn alphabets. It's only 27, goddamn it. You need to stop at a certain number.
Yeah, but you can dig all you want. Hey, they have multiple of many letters at this point.
What will end up happening is they will create an inclusive term. That's what's going to end up happening.
Right.
And that's what it'll be.
But my point is not about the letters, right? My point is, regardless of what digs the average population wants to make or not, allowing people to claim their struggle and being included as part of the struggle is only making them more powerful. And that's why we are weaker, because we are looking for ways to divide, not to come together.
This is one thing that they're smart at, that they were smart at. But if you have a memory, you kind of look at them sideways. Okay. In the 80s, because you remember they dumped AIDS on the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then they switched over to the Black community. But after that, what they used to do with the gay community, like, it's good to be gay because we don't have kids, we make more money, and we're not getting in as much trouble as everybody else. We're kind of like a model minority in a sense. And that's why they're trying to ram AIDS down their throat. Like, see, something wrong with y'all. But see, over the years, what's been happening is what initially was the positive suit has become to be, no, we have kids and we're not having more money. We're doing this, that, and the third. So the more you say you're adding to the thing, or the more they say they're adding, people are starting to talk about traditional values per se, right? And it's like, what are you trying to be heterosexual? Because they remember it one way, and now it's looking at, okay, now you're trying to be heterosexual and gay, and that's the one thing that we can't do as a people. Is like, okay, when you think of our agenda, it never evolves.
But I think, but the part that I think you're missing, LER, is I'm like, that's proving Rudy's point. Like, if instead of trying to make all these demarcations, that instead we were like, listen, these are things that Black people experience and struggle with. So let's look at the things impacting Black people. And if it impacts any of us, then we will strive.
It's our fight. Exactly.
So, right. So, for example, I will fight for, the killing of Black men in the streets the same way that I fight for reproductive access for Black women. They're both vital issues, that we're not missing out or somehow deferring because we look at one and the other. They're all tied, even if we don't see how they're tied on the surface. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. I feel like we do get distracted. We do get, because we're so busy trying to demarcate who's really a part of the Blackness and who's not, instead of just saying, yo, we're all in the struggle. If you identify with us and you're in it, then you're in it. And just being done.
Here's the messed up thing. I'm sorry. Weird. And I believe it was LAR who said it earlier. There was a time when the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the garbage man, the numbers runner, the grocery store owner all lived within 10 blocks of each other. So it did a lot to regulate how much they would want to do in their own neighborhood. Now you get, and I count myself among, when you get to a certain point and you leave, the connection, Brother David here in the chat, very good friend, I have a great deal of respect for. He asked me a question once. He says, "Why, besides your skin color, name the other things you have in common with the Black community?" And it was like getting punched in the back of the head, because the fact that I had to stop for a second to think about it, because I was like, well, I like all this stuff. He says, yeah, but that's true for all cultures. I said, well, I love jazz. He was like, so jazz is a multinational. He says, what are the things specific to Black America that you have in common besides your skin color? And that's when you have to step back and go, so
no, you don't, because everyone, you don't. Everyone, that's that. Okay, this is how people win. Hold on. This is a fallacious reasoning technique.
I thought that's all I had to do.
No, this is a fallacious reasoning technique, and this is how people get you. Because the thing is, Chinese people, Japanese people, Korean people, Indian people, none of them half of them look the same. The only thing that they can say is that they were born here instead of there, right? So no, you don't need to have 700 different things in common with someone to be part of the Black community. But see, that's how they get you.
Because I would tell you, if I converted to Judaism this Sabbath, I would be able to utilize the law of return to go to Israel. It wouldn't matter that I lived my whole life in Brooklyn doing whatever I was doing in the street. All right. So, but this is just what I'm saying. I'm like, why do you need anything more than being Black?
This is the great, one of the great tricks of America. Anything that is your own is American. See, that's the thing. When you said jazz, everybody, everybody my ass.
Black people invented that.
Now, the other thing about that, when you talked about, I was talking about everybody being in the same community. That's part of what I was getting at with the other comment. And it's just about in general. What we're seeing right now is Black people say, okay, are you with a Black agenda or are you with a minority agenda? See, those are two different things. And if you're not in the same space, guess what you're gonna be tested on? Since we don't live in the same place, we don't live in the same area, we don't do the same things. Is your agenda Black? Is your agenda minority? And if you say, well, it's Black, okay, well, what's the Black agenda? Blah, blah, blah. No, that's the minority agenda. But I happen to be Black, so it's no, that's a minority agenda. So it's okay to have a minority agenda.
I think actually it would do us well to reserve our own resources for everything that is Black specific, but allow ourselves to join and attach ourselves to minority specific agendas if they will benefit us should they come through. And the reason why is
history, though.
Pardon?
That's the issue, Booby. The history is the opposite. The history is everybody historically.
Has the history served us well?
No. In history,
but what are you going to talk about the gay agenda? Because that's not what I'm talking about. Or the women agenda? No.
What I'm talking about is every agenda in America, the black people have been tied to it to help. in and outside of America. The issue has always been, the issue has wound up becoming reciprocity. Other groups have an idea that, you know what, they ride with us. So what you gonna do for them? Huh? What you talking about?
See, but that's what I'm saying.
That's the
What did
problem.
I say? The very first thing I said is reserve our resources for our specific fights. We need to stop using our resources for someone else's fight or for fights that we could maybe get a side benefit from. That's I'm not saying to do that, right? I'm saying we need to use our resources for us specific things. But it doesn't hurt us, right? For them to throw in the word black, for them to have power on something that is going to help us overall. That's what I'm saying.
I
So
think sometimes we get lost in the forest for the trees. Like I'm like, at the end of the day, right? So, you know, we're so caught up on who's agenda. And to me, I'm like, yo, I think there are bigger things at play. Like good, bad, or indifferent, we have seen economic collapse and we've seen it hit the Black community first. And so now, you know, even though with all the technology and the different things, it's like, how much are we sharing the knowledge with other Black people? Like it took me forever to find a Black resource to explain Bitcoin to me. You know, I'm like, these are the
wait. Say that again.
So because, for example, right, like one of the things that's important to me is to speak to Black people about new technologies and new finances and things like that, right? I try to go to people who not only are knowledgeable about something, but who are knowledgeable and share some kind of Blackness with me, right? And the reason for that is because with all adoption of all kinds of technology or anything like that, it tends to impact our community differently because we're starting in a different place, right? So when I was looking at Bitcoin, it was like, yeah, there were plenty of resources that were non-Black, right? And that's great, but having someone who is familiar with Black history, who is familiar with the economic rules and laws that were put into place to deliberately shut us out of different markets, that was the knowledge I wanted to have, because I'm like, okay, then that means that you can talk to me about how I can potentially avoid some of those pitfalls when I'm trying to enter this thing that I know so little about. And I'll use something more dear to my heart, like healthcare. You see, whenever there's open enrollment, I'm always looking out for Black women and Black men to say, okay, guys, this is how you can negotiate your benefits. This is what these things mean. This is how things have played out. Because good, bad, or indifferent, I know that when they go into healthcare, when they enter that hospital, they're going to need a level of advocacy that a white person or someone else may either have to have a different kind of advocacy or at least be knowledgeable about the role that should play. And
I
so
haven't thought about it that way, because for me, Bitcoin was always one of the most neutral things, because I didn't necessarily see it as having a
right,
racial. And that's the thing. From way back.
Exactly, but that's just the thing. Even these things that seem race neutral, because of our history and our experiences, it's going to hit different. We're going to experience it different. And so how can we expect, just to circle it back to the conversation we had earlier, it's the same way, like if you have a high school dropout who had 2 kids and now you want them to compete in the open market without prepping them for, hey, listen, because you grew up poor, you're going to have these beliefs that might keep you from taking this advantage. These are the kinds of conversations that we need to have with one another. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's kind of where I think Ruby and I are coming from, when we're so busy trying to like modulate these things, when I think we'd be better off just saying, oh, here's these things happening. Black people, this is what you need to know about it.
I'm gonna use a true story that happened maybe about 3-4 months ago with your healthcare. My father had a heart attack.
Sorry to hear it.
That's about his 3rd, but yeah,
Serious. Whoa.
Yeah. And he had a heart attack and he died. And he didn't know. But they brought him back. And how they brought him back, he found out there was a Black doctor in the room. All the doctors and nurses that weren't Black was like, oh, did all I can, gotta go. And he said, the only reason I'm here is because the black doctor was like, nah, I could get him. I could save him. And he was the only one that he brought him back by himself. And the reason I'm marrying that with what you were saying about healthcare is because in the community in general, in the forest from the trees thing, is because unfortunately we have an apprehension because depending on who you are in our community, you might be the black doctor that just walk off. And that sucks because back in the day we had, like I said, we had everybody in the same community. So that level of I got your back is really high schoolish now, where do you have my back or are you trying to be with the cool kids and you'll let me die to prove something to them?
Right.
You know.
And I definitely hear, and I think that is to circle back and to pull in what Ruby is saying, like that to me, it's at what point do we start reaffirming with one another, listen, our obligation is to each other. Like at some point, whatever differences may be, because please understand, when I walk into a room and there are Black patients, I'm not asking whether they are from Brooklyn or Jamaica or wherever. I'm like, how do I make sure that this family gets the full benefit of everything we got here? You know what I mean? What are the barriers that can impact their care? And what can I do to sidestep that? And that obligation, that feeling of obligation is something that I try to recreate in any of the people I mentor, anybody who comes up through school, all of the students, the nursing students and stuff that come in. I talk very frankly about that. And so that's kind of what I'm saying is I think that until we start having those kinds of frank conversations, that, you know, I feel the struggle. And I think you're absolutely right that good, bad, or indifferent, for so long, it was that in order to be successful, you had to cast away, you know, this community that you belong to. And Yusef, like, you know, both you and I shared that experience of liking things that were not necessarily a part of, you know, Black popular culture at the time or whatever that is. But what I refuse to do is to allow that experience to keep me from feeling a sense of connection and obligation to people who look like me.
I feel like
Facts.
you have a better, stronger constitution than I have, because
Facts.
when I remember as a very young man, I had access
you're saying
to
I'm
the
younger
world.
than you?
Once I realized as a very young man that I could travel the world and it wasn't a struggle, and I don't mean the traveling part. When I realized it wasn't a struggle to just be me and it was just okay, I was like, watch this. You people enjoy your lives. I'll be enjoying.
You know what though?
That is the problem.
But here's the thing.
The only difference was that I said, yo, this liberated life is lit. Let me see who else I could get to be like.
Yeah, but you know
But
what?
see, no. You know what though?
I did the same thing, and I just got my teeth kicked in repeatedly.
But you know why? Because here's the thing, right? It's all about what your actual attempt is. Now, the part of the issue I find, at least, when we're looking for like minds, are we looking for people who are actually literally exactly like us? And what I found is that people who appear to be just like me are often nothing like me at all, especially when it comes to heart and character. And so what I stopped looking for anything that revolved around surface appearance whatsoever. I mean, when I say surface appearance, I don't mean looks. I mean, like, as far as what they are doing, how they speak or whatever. And I started looking at character. And when I started looking at their character, their underlying intentions and motivations, you know, where they came from, what they've gone through, where they're trying to go. When I started looking at that, what I started finding are pieces of me. And finding those different pieces of me in different people. And I stayed me. I'm me here. I'm here, me with the Jamaicans. I'm me with the McMaster University crowd. It doesn't matter where I am, I'm me. And I'm thoroughly, genuinely, wholly me. And because I decided to claim me, and all these genuine people, because it's hard to find genuine people, but when you find a genuine person, they will value you just because you're genuine. So I'm genuine, they're genuine. This is how I made my connection and my bond, some that have spanned decades now, right? It's over that, because those people who are genuinely them, they're the ones who are going to support you, be down for you. You might be able to open their minds in some way, just in the same way that they're going to be able to open your mind in other ways. What I've found is it doesn't matter where I've gone in the world, who I've met in the world, what they've achieved or accomplished or not, none of those factors made any difference as to whether or not they were like me in ways that actually really, to me at least, counted, which had to do a lot more with their character, who they are, how they treat people, how they see relationships, connectivity, collectivity, and community.
Dave needs to be stopped. Would you read what he just said?
Now we got breeding programs. Dang.
Dave needs to be stopped. Listen, I want to point out one thing that was said earlier.
Wait. Dave, you can't smell drowning, but you part of the smart people. Dave can't smell drowning, but he's part of the smart people. You.
Poor Ting.
You know what? Dave has been able to come up sometimes with the connection. I'm going to tell him that. But check this out. Level 668 says something that warmed my heart. It's been a long time since I've heard blacks talk to each other and listen to each other with respect for each other on YouTube, that is. And this panel and the respect they have for each other is very refreshing. And I want to say I'm glad to be able to provide that space. What I ask of everybody watching this is a couple of things, because nothing is free. And what I ask is make sure you click the subscribe and the thumbs up and the bell, but share this. My goal is in the next couple of days, I want to get to 900 people. I want everybody to share this with 3 or 4 people that they know, not just random people. Say, hey, these guys have some interesting conversations. Sometimes it's 5 minutes. That's a lie. That's a lie. I've never had a 5-minute live chat. Sometimes they're short and sometimes they're longer, but that's what you can do to help this community grow, because this has helped me to be in front of a lot of really cool and interesting people, not just here on the panel, but here the people in the comments. What I'll also say, and because we're gonna have to save some of this for next time, like Rudy said, at Ruby and at Yusef, don't agree we start producing goods and stop the brain drain. The best way to empower economically the black community is look at the diaspora in African countries and oh, look at this.
There's a huge brain drain in Jamaica. I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, Rudy, listen, he said, are you living close to Scarborough? I don't necessarily believe where she lives is important. That's not really something we need to discuss here.
I want to know, why are you asking? Do you think that Scarborough's the bad place? No. I'll explain why I'm saying this and why I think he thinks
you
it's
see
relevant.
How I tried to smooth that over and she just...
I was like, oh, he trying, but it ain't going to work.
No, it's not going to happen. Because I think what happens is this, right? So people hear buzz cities, for example, Toronto, Scarborough, Mississauga, Oakville, and based on that, they think that these areas are either all good or all bad or all rich or all poor, something like that. Now, Scarborough tends to get itself a very bad name. It did for a lot of decades, where people only focused on, crime and those types of areas in Scarborough. Those are not the only areas. There are actually some incredibly rich areas in Scarborough, just like in Mississauga, which is, it has literally the richest road in all of the GTA. Also has, really crime, gun, gang riddled areas, right?
Rude.
So
explain GTA. We're American. We're thinking Grand Theft Auto.
Sorry.
Sorry. And this is what we're gonna do, right? Ruby, you're gonna explain GTA, then you're gonna roll us into your goodbye comments, because I gotta start wrapping this up.
Okay. So, GTA stands for Greater Toronto Area. So when we say GTA, because Ontario, when you look at our provinces, right? One of our provinces would take up 12 of your states. Like, it's a huge, giant landmass. So when you say you're from Toronto, or you're from Ontario, that doesn't give a good idea even of, you could literally be living in Roughage, in Ontario. So where do you live? Greater Toronto Area. It's kind of like, we'll say like a 2-mile radius all around Toronto. And it kind of describes...
DMV.
Where DC, Maryland, and Virginia intersect, we call that the DMV. So it sounds like it's a similar dynamic.
It's like that, only it encompasses several cities
Bigger area.
instead, right? Yeah. So you've got Toronto, Scarborough, Mississauga, Oakville, Burlington. There's a bunch of different cities in it,
It
and
works the
some
same
are
way.
suburbs,
Yeah.
some
And
is
that's the
city.
same way in the DMV. So there's Clinton, Maryland. There's Alexandria, Virginia.
Right.
DC. Got you. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's basically what it is. And what I noticed from that, being someone who's lived in Mississauga almost my whole life, really, and my parents moved me out of the hood to the upper middle class neighborhood that we lived in, that they could barely afford, and sometimes they didn't eat so that way I could. But I lived in upper middle class, and I went to the best school in all of, again, the GTA. And the funny thing about that is the hood they moved me out of is also in Mississauga, just in a different part of Mississauga. And my cousin who got left behind, in essence, I mean, he didn't get to move out of the hood. And right now his picture, I just played it yesterday on Neo Sector for Women and talked about the case. He's wanted right now. His older brother was arrested for murder. He's wanted on robbery and whatever charges that are all connected to this murder. This is what happens. It can easily happen all in the same city here. So I think that's why he was asking. I think that people like to try to dismiss people's experiences, or try to write them off based on where you live or what you've gone through or whatever. And I can just say, and wrap it up with this as well, that some of the places I've been to, God, in Jamaica, I didn't want to get out of the car, and I didn't. Legit, I'm not getting out of the car. You can't make me. I mean, they have wild ass dogs. Okay, like, and I saw this in the Bronx too. The one time I went to the Bronx,
In the Bronx.
there was some wild. This guy was walking, and I'm guessing they're his dogs. I swear to God, this dog was trying to get into the car so it could eat us. Okay, this is a wild ass, mean ass looking pitties. And the only other place I ever saw that happen was in Jamaica. And I'm telling you, they're like, no, we're gonna eat. It's okay. I don't need to eat. I would rather starve to death than get out of this car. I am so scared of dogs anyway.
No, baby.
With these wild ass dogs, and the thing is, no one owns them. I don't know where they keep coming from. No one owns these dogs or these cats. They just wander around the country. Like, it's so weird. Living free, eating babies or whatever to stay alive. I don't know. Anyway, my point is though, is that honestly, some of the conditions I've seen in both Jamaica, and even when I went to the Bronx that time and whatever, I've never seen living conditions like that. And I have friends and family from the hood, from like what would be like the ghetto, what would be Section 8 housing, but here, actually, honestly, they've done a lot of amazing things trying to fix that grouping of poor people, disenfranchised people in the GTA. But anyway, my point is that to me, what it comes down to is what I see are cities that build themselves up, groups of Black people that have built themselves up into something that I would call basically a functional, almost little mini country of its own. And the one thing that I've seen in regards to that is that they were not about this individualism crap. They weren't about self. They were about building, and it wasn't even about building for other people in the community. It was about grouping together with other like minds to build for their children and their children's children. They were looking 50 years, 100 years, 200 years down the road about what they're establishing now. And when I look at immigrant communities, for example, that is something I see so heavily. Are people who, I'm telling you, ask your cab driver what the hell they did in their country. It is amazing the answers you will get. Again, biochemical engineer with 3 PhDs and stuff. These people can have conversations that will blow your mind. You can't follow them. They'll sit there and they'll follow the stereotype because it makes you happy, and maybe you'll tip them more and pretend that they're idiots and pretend they don't know English and whatever. Meanwhile, they are brilliant. They're like rocket scientists, right? But
Wow.
opportunity. There was an opportunity in their country. Or, a lot of them had daughters and recognized the lives that their daughters were going to lead. They didn't want for their daughters. And so they come here, and their planning is for their children and their grandchildren and their and they are willing to sacrifice a fair amount to make sure that happens. Now, I don't know about y'all. I know I'm lucky in the fact my parents were willing to sacrifice things, make their lives a little bit harder after, the initial, oops, I'm pregnant and a teenager, to try to make my life better. And I'm willing to do the same. because I know that the life I've achieved is not perfection. It's not multimillionaire. It's not generational wealth yet. But what I'm willing to do is make those sacrifices and put in that hard work, because I will revel if on my deathbed I can look at my kids making millions of dollars and know that I had a hand in setting that up. And I know they're going to go back to a community that is thriving, full of people where the bottom 1% of them is not the worst of the worst, because we worked really hard to make sure that even the worst of us was doing better than they are today. So I don't know. I don't think at the end of the day, as long as your bottom is way down here, your ceiling can't be any higher than here. You want your ceiling to be higher than here, you want it to be up here, then your bottom's got to come up here. That's just the way it works. And I think we need to stop being so selfish with our thought processes within these things and start thinking a little bit more about the collective and about the community, because it will actually overall benefit us more as individuals if we can do that. And that is my final 2 cents. Thank you for having me, Yusef. Before Sister you tease me.
Oh, and it's always a pleasure getting to have Ruby on here, so I don't feel like the only civilized person. Right?
Like, what are you gonna say about
the only civilized, even.
You know, I will have to say that, you know, in all of the conversations about where things aren't, right, where we're not yet, I think sometimes it is a good thing to acknowledge the fact that we're having this conversation. The fact that we're all on the same page in regards of believing, okay, we deserve better, we should have better, there are things keeping us from doing better, right? And just having that shared understanding is, to me, growth. Right? It means we're moving in the right direction. Does that mean that it's not going to be an arduous struggle? Absolutely not. You know, but it says a lot when we actually can look at each other and have these conversations and say, you know what, at least we know we all want to move forward. I think that Ruby brings up an excellent point about being an immigrant. A lot of times my personal experience has been a struggle because, you know, outside of telling people that, hey, I'm not even first generation. If I had a child, my child would have been first generation. But I've spent my life here. My perceptions and my understandings are shaped by my experience in America. And the idea that because I have these other cultural backgrounds, that somehow that minimizes my connection to Blackness and my commitment to Black success and safety and health and liberation is a travesty in my humble opinion, which isn't that humble. So I say all of that to say that as long as we're able to see that there are things out there that we can do and that we can change a narrative, and even just having the belief that we're all we're on the same avenue. We may disagree on how to get there, but then at least it's just a conversation on maps. We're just dialoguing on how to get to that destination, but at least we're all in the place that, yes, this is where we want to go. And so it always warms my heart to see that. One of the questions that Snuggle668 asked was, why does it seem like there are countries that are so rich still, you know, are still poor, while countries that are poor, you know, still have riches? And I think that it all comes down to values, that, countries that have vast resources, you know, sometimes there are some really interesting ways on how they got those resources, and having an understanding as to shared values and choices that we make, and what do we decide as a community are the shared values, that is what shapes whether we are rich or poor. And so that's why, like, whenever I hear about people talking about America, I'm like, listen, Jamaica is beautiful, beautiful country, awesome place. But the opportunity opportunity there is limited. Access to resources is limited. So that's why so many of us came here, because we saw that there was a place for us here. And so we came here to be a part of that, not to take away from it, not to minimize it, but it's like, you know, and understand that we've been here before 1980, because that is another belief that people have, that somehow like Caribbean people just showed up, you know, in 1982. It's like, no, we've been here for a minute. You know? And so that's why I'm just hoping that we can evolve to the point where we see all the different kinds of Blackness as being assets, that there are things that we can pull from all of our experiences as Black people to move our nation forward. And quite honestly, you know, white people have been running shit into the ground for a minute. So I feel like, you know, not for nothing, looking to them, it's not like they have this great shining example of what we should do for ourselves, you know. And so it becomes a matter of truly being open to talking to each other and including our experiences so that we can separate the wheat from the chaff. So that's my 2 cents.
You know, I want to say thank you for that. I mean, that was actually pretty concise. Even though it was long, it was concise. I think it touched on the important points. So I love having you around. I'm going to do something slightly unfair. I'm going to say first, LAR, did you write down what you were going to say next?
I wrote down 5 points. And
good. What I'm going to do next is totally unfair, because instead of letting you just discuss what you are about to talk about, I want to ask you about something that I knew was around, but I want to know if you can give me a quick, like.
Can you hear me? Don't tell me my thing just paused.
No, we can hear you. We just,
Yusef
froze. That's that Brazil internet over there for you.
That's my book. It's basically for guys who are non-custodial fathers, the things that you can do to better the situation. The things you can do legally, the things you could do just interacting, the things you could do to minimize the damage that can be caused because of separated households or broken homes. So that's what that's about.
Wait. My internet dropped for some reason.
I know.
I need you to keep talking all over again.
Oh, Lord have mercy. The book is about lessons from a non-custodial father. It's lessons that I learned along the way, whether it's legally, family-wise, or even socially, as far as parenting and dealing with schools and everything else. So if you're a man dealing with certain things, to navigate it, to have some things that you can navigate through or see coming a mile away, so you don't get jammed up and you also don't waste a lot of time bickering instead of parenting.
So, now, is this something that you're looking at as how to deal with the court system, or is this how you're looking at dealing with the parent?
Court, parent, school, family, actual just growing up and communicating, and also how to make sure your relationships don't get in the way from your parenting. You know, so that's what I made it like a
Okay, well, go over your 5 bullet points so I can wrap this thing up. I want to show that to everybody because I know you're not going to really do a bunch of self-promotion, but I want people to know that that's out there.
Oh, appreciate it. Well, the first point is don't be imprisoned by the negative Black stereotype. The second thing I would say is be open to the fact that you could be a multifaceted genius, because that's what you're going to need to be now and in the coming time. The third thing is understand that there's 2 different types of American dreams: a selfless American dream and a selfish American dream. So if you want to build a community, you're going to have a selfless American dream. The fourth thing about that is also we're going to have to learn how to balance our hedonism and our legacy. because this is part of America's issue. That, you know, I got mine, you get yours, but I'm gonna do whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we're ruining the next generations for being too selfish. And the fifth thing is basically this. You have an obligation to respect your fellow brother and sister. You don't have to agree, you don't have to get along, but you have to respect each other. Because guess what? You know good and well the rest of the world's not. So that's it.
You gave me an idea for something I want to have a discussion on. When you said balancing hedonism and legacy, I think you could put some ideas into our head. That might have to be one of those Patreon things. Thank you all so much. And thanks to everybody who wrote this out and who enjoyed the conversation. As I said, what I need you to do is share this. That's critically important. Share this with somebody. Make sure you click subscribe and say, hey, give these guys a chance to have some really good discussions. And I say love you all and thank you. And for the people on the panel, hang around for a second backstage. And to everybody else, I hope you have a great night. Happy Sunday.